Picture yourself gazing across endless sand dunes under a starlit sky. Deserts may seem empty and harsh, but they hold some of nature's most peaceful secrets. These quiet lands have stories that can gently carry you into sleep. Antarctica holds the title as Earth's largest desert, and yes, you read that right. Deserts aren't defined by sand dunes and cacti, but by how little precipitation they receive. Antarctica gets less than 2 inches of snow per year. That frozen wasteland? It's technically drier than the Sahara. Speaking of the Sahara, this sandy giant spans over 3.5 million square miles. That's bigger than the entire United States. You could fit China inside it and still have room for Texas. Wild, right? But here's what really puts things in perspective. Deserts don't just sit there looking pretty. They're constantly shape-shifting, like nature's slowest dance. The Sahara itself used to be a lush green paradise just 6,000 years ago. Rivers flowed where sand dunes tower today. Ancient rock paintings show hippos and crocodiles lounging in areas that haven't seen water in millennia. These massive landscapes shift grain by grain, dune by dune, over thousands of years. It's geological meditation in action. Wind patterns change, mountains rise, and what was once ocean floor becomes parched earth. The Gobi Desert grows by about 1,300 square miles every year, swallowing grasslands like a patient giant. Then there's something magical that happens when day turns to evening in these vast spaces. Desert sunsets aren't just pretty. They're actually nature's most reliable daily meditation session. And the reason they look so incredible? Well, it's all about those tiny dust particles floating around in that super dry air. When sunlight hits desert dust, something magical happens. The particles scatter blue light away while letting reds, oranges, and deep purples pass right through. It's like the desert has its own built-in Instagram filter that's been working for millions of years. Pretty neat, right? But here's what really gets me. Desert cultures figured this out ages ago. They didn't need smartphones or stress apps. They just knew that watching the sun dip below those endless horizons was the perfect way to end each day. Bedouin tribes would actually plan their evening meals around sunset time, turning it into this beautiful daily ritual. The temperature shift during these sunsets creates the most perfect natural air conditioning you can imagine. As that blazing heat starts to fade, a gentle coolness creeps across the sand. Desert winds pick up just enough to create this soft, constant whisper. It's like the entire landscape is collectively exhaling after holding its breath all day. No wonder ancient desert dwellers considered sunset sacred. They understood something we're just rediscovering, that some of the best therapy comes from simply watching the sky change colors. Speaking of sounds, though, deserts have an even more mysterious trick up their sandy sleeves. Deep in the heart of certain deserts, something magical happens that sounds like it belongs in a fairy tale. Sand dunes actually sing. No, really. They hum, whistle, and drone with haunting melodies that can be heard for miles. The Sahara's singing dunes produce deep, organ-like tones that rumble across the landscape. Meanwhile, dunes in California's Mojave Desert create higher-pitched sounds, almost like distant violins. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. The sand has to be just right. The grains need to be perfectly round, dry as desert air, and about the size of fine sugar. When these grains cascade down steep dune faces, they vibrate together in harmony. Think of it as nature's own orchestra. with billions of tiny musicians playing in perfect synchronization. The sound happens when surface sand slides over deeper, more compact layers. Each grain acts like a tiny tuning fork, creating frequencies that blend into these otherworldly songs. Some dunes boom so loudly they can reach 90 decibels. That's as loud as a motorcycle engine. Ancient cultures created entire legends around these singing sands. The Chinese called them Dragon's Roar. Arab travelers spoke of buried spirits calling out from beneath the dunes. These musical landscapes offer something even more enchanting than their daytime concerts. Picture finding a perfect swimming pool in the middle of the world's driest places. That's exactly what an oasis offers, and they're way more magical than any Hollywood movie could show you. These green havens pop up when underground water decides to take a little vacation on the surface. Deep beneath those endless sand dunes, ancient rivers still flow through rock layers, carrying water that might be thousands of years old. When this hidden water finds a crack or weak spot in the rocks above, it bubbles up like nature's own drinking fountain. The sound alone could put you to sleep instantly. Palm fronds rustling in the warm desert breeze create this gentle whisper that's been lulling travelers to sleep for centuries. It's like nature's white noise machine, but infinitely better. Here's what's really cool though. Traditional oasis gardens weren't just random plantings. Desert peoples mastered the art of three-level gardening. Tall date palms provided shade, fruit trees grew in the middle layer, and vegetables sprouted at ground level. Each plant protected the others, creating these incredibly efficient green spaces that seemed to defy the surrounding harshness. The entire setup worked like a natural air conditioner, dropping temperatures by 20 degrees or more. But wait until you hear about the desert's most mysterious trick: mirages that dance across the horizon. Mirages aren't just desert tricks. They're pure physics wrapped in poetry. When hot sand heats the air directly above it, something magical happens. The heated air becomes less dense than the cooler air higher up, creating invisible layers that bend light like a cosmic lens. Your brain expects light to travel in straight lines, but in the desert, light curves. It bends upward through these temperature layers, carrying images of the sky down to ground level. Suddenly, you're seeing a perfect blue lake where there's nothing but sand. The ancient Egyptians called mirages the breathing of the desert god. Persian poets wrote entire verses about phantom oases that danced just beyond reach. Even Napoleon's soldiers swore they saw entire cities floating in the Sahara, complete with towers and bustling streets. Here's what gets really wild. There are different types of mirages. Superior mirages flip images upside down, making distant mountains appear to float in midair. Fata Morgana. Mirages stack multiple images on top of each other, creating ethereal castles that shift and shimmer like dreams. Desert photographers spend years trying to capture the perfect mirage shot. The irony? These illusions only appear when conditions are absolutely perfect. Too much wind ruins everything. But there's something even more mysterious about desert nights that makes mirages seem ordinary by comparison. When the sun disappears behind the dunes, something magical happens. The desert transforms into nature's own concert hall. You'd think deserts would be completely silent at night, but that's the biggest misconception ever. They're actually buzzing with activity. Well, not literally buzzing. That would be annoying when you're trying to sleep. Desert foxes make soft chirping sounds as they hunt. Owls call out with their gentle hoots echoing across the sand. Even tiny kangaroo rats create barely audible drumming sounds with their hind legs, like nature's quietest percussion section. But here's what makes desert sound so incredibly soothing. The dry air acts like a natural sound filter. Without all that moisture weighing down the atmosphere, sounds travel differently. They become cleaner, crisper, and somehow more peaceful. Coyotes add their haunting harmonies from miles away. Their calls seem to float on the night breeze, creating this otherworldly lullaby. Indigenous peoples have always known that coyote songs help humans fall into deeper sleep states. The wind itself becomes an instrument, whistling softly through rock formations and creating gentle whooshing sounds as it moves sand around. It's like having a white noise machine that runs on desert breeze. These nighttime symphonies have been putting desert travelers to sleep for thousands of years. But there's something even more mesmerizing about how wind sculpts the landscape itself. Wind becomes the desert's most patient artist, working 24 hours a day with nothing but sand as its medium. Every grain gets repositioned with mathematical precision, creating patterns so perfect they'd make any human designer jealous. Those ripple marks you see across sand dunes, they're not random. Wind speed, grain size, and surface texture all work together like a recipe. When wind hits about 10 miles per hour, magic happens. The sand starts dancing. Here's what's wild. The spacing between ripples follows the same mathematical ratios found in seashells and flower petals. Nature apparently loves good math, even when nobody's watching. Desert winds don't just blow randomly either. They follow predictable patterns, like invisible rivers flowing across the landscape. Morning winds behave differently than afternoon ones. Cool air sinks, while warm air rises, creating these gentle circulation patterns that sculpt sand with incredible consistency. But here's my favorite part about wind sculpture. It never stops. While you sleep tonight, desert winds are busy rearranging millions of tiny grains. Each one gets picked up, carried a few inches or maybe a few feet, then gently placed in its new spot. The whole process is incredibly soothing to watch. Sand flows like slow-motion water, creating temporary masterpieces that'll be completely different by tomorrow morning. Speaking of temporary beauty, wait until you discover what happens when the desert moon rises over these constantly shifting sculptures. Desert moon watching hits differently than anywhere else on Earth. The dry air acts like nature's own lens cleaner, making our celestial neighbor appear so crisp you'd swear you could reach out and touch those ancient craters. Ancient Bedouins called the full moon their desert lamp, and honestly, they weren't exaggerating. When that silver orb rises over endless dunes, it transforms the entire landscape into something from a dream. The sand practically glows, creating this ethereal light show that's been putting people in a trance for thousands of years. Here's what's wild about desert moonlight. It's bright enough to read by, yet gentle enough to lull you into the deepest sleep of your life. Desert cultures have been using lunar calendars for millennia, not just for practical reasons, but because watching the moon's phases from the desert feels like having a front row seat to the universe's own meditation session. The silence amplifies everything. You can actually hear the moonbeams. Okay, maybe not literally, but the quiet is so profound that your mind starts picking up on subtleties you'd never notice in the city. No light pollution, no distractions, just you and that magnificent moon painting silver highways across the dunes. But wait until you discover what happens when desert flowers decide to put on their own nighttime show under these same magical moonbeams. Who knew the harshest places on Earth could produce some of the most stunning flowers? Desert cacti pull off one of nature's greatest surprises every year. Most people think cacti are just prickly water storage units. Well, they're wrong. These spiny survivors are actually incredible flower factories waiting for the perfect moment to explode with color. A single barrel cactus can produce dozens of bright yellow blooms that look like tiny suns perched on top of its thorny crown. The timing is everything. Desert plants don't waste energy on flashy displays when conditions aren't right. They wait, sometimes for years. Then boom, the rains come, temperatures drop just enough, and suddenly the entire desert transforms into a flower carpet that would make any gardener weep with envy. Prickly pears bloom in brilliant yellows and hot pinks. Ghost plants produce ethereal white flowers that seem to glow in moonlight. Even the intimidating cholla cactus, nicknamed jumping cholla for obvious painful reasons, creates magenta flowers so beautiful you might forget about those nasty spines. Here's the really wild part. Some desert blooms only last 24 hours. Blink, and you miss nature's most exclusive flower show. The queen of the night, Sirius, opens for just one magical evening per year. But desert wildflower seasons, that's when the real magic happens across entire landscapes. Ever wonder why 5 minutes in the desert feels like an hour anywhere else? Your brain literally processes time differently in these vast, unchanging landscapes. The constant horizon tricks your mind into a slower rhythm. Without the usual urban markers, traffic lights changing, people rushing past, phones buzzing, your internal clock downshifts automatically. Desert dwellers have known this for thousands of years. Ancient Bedouin tribes built their entire culture around what they called patient time. They'd make decisions based on seasons, not schedules. A journey wasn't measured in hours, but in the number of sunrises it would take. Pretty smart approach, honestly. Modern research backs this up completely. The human brain uses environmental cues to gauge time passage. Remove those cues, like the desert naturally does, and suddenly you're living in what psychologists call flow state. That's where healing happens. Then there's the therapeutic magic. Desert meditation retreats report that guests achieve deep relaxation states 30% faster than in other environments. The combination of endless space, minimal distractions, and that natural time-slowing effect creates perfect conditions for mental reset. Your nervous system literally can't stay wound up when surrounded by such vastness. The desert forces you to breathe deeper, think slower, exist more peacefully. But there's something even more mysterious flowing beneath all that sand. Deep beneath the world's harshest deserts flow some of Earth's most incredible secrets. We're talking about massive underground rivers that have been quietly flowing for thousands of years, completely hidden from the blazing sun above. The Sahara Desert sits on top of what might be the world's largest freshwater aquifer system. This underground ocean contains enough water to cover the entire United States in 3 feet of water. Pretty wild for a place where it barely rains once a decade, right? These hidden waterways aren't just sitting there like underground lakes. They're actually moving, flowing slowly through rock and sand at a pace that would make a snail look speedy. Some of these ancient waters have been traveling underground for over 10,000 years, carrying their liquid cargo from distant mountains to far-off seas. The Nubian sandstone aquifer stretches beneath 4 countries in North Africa. It's been flowing since before the pyramids were built, before humans invented writing, before we figured out how to make cheese. This water started its journey when woolly mammoths still roamed the earth. Aboriginal Australians knew about these hidden rivers long before modern geology caught up. They could find water in the middle of nowhere by reading subtle signs in the landscape. But what happens when these underground streams finally reach the surface? Desert stone gardens might just be Earth's most patient artists at work. Wind and water spend thousands of years polishing rocks into smooth, rounded sculptures that would make any Zen master jealous. These natural arrangements happen completely by accident, yet they look more deliberate than anything humans could design. The really fascinating part? Desert stones develop what geologists call desert varnish, a dark, glossy coating that forms over centuries. It's basically nature's way of giving rocks a permanent tan. This coating creates stunning contrast against lighter stone underneath, making even ordinary pebbles look like precious gems. But here's what gets me every time I see these formations. They're constantly rearranging themselves. Flash floods move stones around like a cosmic game of chess played in slow motion. What you see today won't be exactly the same in 50 years. Ancient desert dwellers noticed this too. They started creating their own stone circles and arrangements, working with the desert's natural tendency to organize rocks. Some of these human-made stone gardens are still standing after thousands of years, proving that sometimes the best art happens when you work with nature instead of against it. The mathematical precision is mind-blowing. Stones naturally sort themselves by size and weight during floods, creating perfect gradients without any human intervention. Speaking of precision, wait until you hear how desert peoples turn this natural organization into something even more remarkable. Picture ancient highways made not of asphalt, but of shifting sand and camel hoof prints. For thousands of years, these desert trade routes connected civilizations that seemed impossibly far apart. The Silk Road alone stretched over 4,000 miles, mostly through desert. But here's what made these journeys special: the pace. Camels naturally walk at about 3 miles per hour. No rushing, no road rage, just steady, rhythmic movement that forced travelers into a meditative state, whether they wanted it or not. Desert navigation became an art form passed down through generations. Caravan leaders could read the stars like street signs, identify wind patterns by the way sand gathered around rocks, and find water by watching where birds flew at dawn. These weren't just survival skills. They were forms of desert wisdom that required incredible patience and observation. The really fascinating part? Caravans would stop for days at oases, creating temporary communities where strangers from different continents would share meals, stories, and trade goods. Chinese silk merchants would sit beside African gold traders, all unified by the desert's equalizing power. Even today, you can find ancient camel paths carved into stone by millions of hooves over centuries, each step worn smooth by patient persistence. Speaking of persistence, desert peoples developed some truly ingenious ways to survive in these harsh conditions. Ancient desert peoples figured out something we're just rediscovering today. They didn't fight the desert. They danced with it. Take the Bedouins, for example. These desert masters developed flowing robes that seemed counterintuitive. Why wear more clothing in blazing heat? Well, loose fabric creates air pockets that work like natural air conditioning. The robes trap cool air near the skin while deflecting the sun's rays. Genius, right? But here's what really blows my mind. Desert dwellers could find water where you'd see nothing but sand. They'd watch for certain birds at dawn, follow animal tracks, or look for slightly greener vegetation. Some even tasted sand. Yes, tasted it, to detect moisture content. The Tuareg people can spot underground water by reading subtle changes in sand color. Then there's the art of shade creation. Desert architects didn't just build walls. They engineered cooling systems. Courtyards funneled cool night air down into living spaces. Thick walls absorbed heat during the day, then slowly released it at night when temperatures dropped. The Aboriginal Australians took this wisdom further. They dig sleeping hollows in sand, creating natural temperature regulation. The sand stayed cool several inches down, even during scorching days. Speaking of temperature control, desert peoples also mastered the mysterious phenomenon of stand in the middle of a bustling city street, cars honking, people shouting, construction hammering away. Now, mentally transport yourself to the heart of the Sahara Desert at midday. The difference isn't just dramatic, it's almost supernatural. Deserts are Earth's natural noise-canceling headphones. The dry air absorbs sound waves differently than humid air does. Without moisture to carry sound vibrations, voices fade quickly. Footsteps disappear into sand. Even the wind moves quietly here, creating whispers instead of howls. But here's what's fascinating. This isn't just emptiness. It's engineered silence. The vast open spaces mean sound waves travel outward without bouncing back. No buildings to create echoes. No trees rustling overhead. Just pure, unfiltered quiet that seems to wrap around you like a blanket. Ancient monks knew this secret centuries ago. They built monasteries in deserts specifically for this acoustic gift. The silence wasn't just peaceful, it was transformative. Modern sound therapy experts are finally catching up to what desert dwellers have known forever. Your brain literally changes in deep quiet. Stress hormones drop. Blood pressure lowers. That constant mental chatter finally gets a chance to settle. The silence becomes so complete that you start hearing things you've never noticed before. Your own heartbeat, your breathing, maybe even your thoughts, clearing up for the first time in years. And when night falls in the desert, this magical quiet creates the perfect stage for nature's most spectacular light show. Sand dunes don't just sit there looking pretty. They're constantly on the move, traveling across landscapes like massive, patient nomads, carrying entire ecosystems on their backs. The Sahara's dunes creep forward at about 50 feet per year. That might sound slow, but multiply that by centuries, and you've got sand mountains relocating entire neighborhoods. Some dunes in China have buried ancient Silk Road cities so completely that archaeologists need GPS just to find where they used to be. But here's what's fascinating. These wandering hills follow surprisingly predictable patterns. Wind hits the gentle slope, carries sand grains up and over the crest, then drops them on the steep side. Grain by grain, the whole dune slowly tumbles forward like a geological somersault. The Kelso Dunes in California have been doing this dance for 25,000 years. They've covered and uncovered the same valleys repeatedly, creating a natural time-lapse movie that only geologists get to appreciate. Sometimes, shifting sands reveal incredible treasures. Ancient pottery emerges from dunes that buried it centuries ago. Old trade routes suddenly reappear like ghost highways. Even entire forests of petrified trees peek out from their sandy blankets, before disappearing again. What's even more remarkable is how these moving mountains create their own weather patterns and microclimates, completely transforming the night sky above them. There's something magical about the smell that hits your nose right before desert rain arrives. That earthy, almost metallic scent has a name: petrichor. It's created when rain hits dry soil after a long drought, releasing oils that plants have been storing up like tiny perfume factories. Desert rain isn't just rare. It's practically an event worth celebrating. Some desert regions go years without a single drop. But when those clouds finally break open, well, that's when the real show begins. The transformation happens almost instantly. Seeds that have been lying dormant in the sand for months, sometimes years, suddenly burst to life. Desert wildflowers explode across the landscape in what locals call a super bloom. It's like nature's been saving up all her colors for one spectacular party. Here's the fascinating part. Desert plants are basically drought preppers. They've evolved to make the most of every precious raindrop. Some cacti can absorb up to 200 gallons of water in a single rainfall, expanding like green water balloons. Then there are the flash floods. Dry creek beds, called arroyos, can go from bone dry to raging rivers in minutes. The water carves temporary channels, reshaping the landscape with surprising force. But just as quickly as the storm arrives, it moves on, leaving behind a refreshed desert ready to bloom. Speaking of desert transformations, the night sky reveals even more secrets. Ever wonder why ancient astronomers built their observatories in the middle of nowhere? Well, they weren't trying to escape civilization. They were chasing the clearest skies on Earth. Deserts offer something modern cities stole from us: pure darkness. No streetlights, no neon signs, no light pollution whatsoever. Just you and the cosmos having an intimate conversation. The Atacama Desert in Chile is so perfect for stargazing that NASA uses it to test Mars rovers. Makes sense, right? But here's what's really wild. Desert air holds almost zero moisture. That means no hazy atmosphere to blur your view. Stars don't twinkle as much in deserts. They just shine, steady and bright, like celestial lighthouses. Ancient Egyptians mapped entire constellations from their desert vantage points, creating calendars that still amaze us today. The silence helps too. No traffic, no air conditioners humming, no neighbor's dog barking at 3 a.m. Just the gentle whisper of wind across sand dunes while you lie on your back, neck craned toward infinity. Desert peoples developed this into meditation practice, spending entire nights watching star patterns shift across the sky. The Bedouins could navigate hundreds of miles using nothing but star positions. Pretty impressive for people without GPS, wouldn't you say? Speaking of impressive desert navigation, wait until you discover what's buried beneath all that sand. Deserts are basically giant time machines, preserving ancient life better than any museum ever could. The dry air and lack of moisture create perfect conditions for fossilization, turning these sandy landscapes into treasure troves of prehistoric history. What makes desert fossils so incredible? Well, most places on Earth are terrible at preservation. Rain, humidity, and vegetation destroy evidence of ancient life pretty quickly. But deserts? They're like nature's freezer, keeping things intact for millions of years. The Sahara Desert regularly reveals fossils of whales and dolphins. Sounds crazy, right? This massive sand sea was once covered by ancient oceans. Now, you can literally walk around and find shark teeth, scattered on the ground like seashells at the beach. Then there's the Gobi Desert, which has given us some of the most complete dinosaur skeletons ever discovered. The famous Fighting Dinosaurs fossil shows a velociraptor locked in eternal combat with a protoceratops, preserved mid-battle for 74 million years. Desert conditions work their magic through rapid burial and dehydration. When sandstorms hit, they can bury entire animals quickly, preventing decay. The dry environment then slowly replaces organic material with minerals, creating perfect stone replicas. Each layer of desert sediment tells a different story, like pages in Earth's diary. But deserts hold more than just ancient bones. Deep beneath the scorching surface of Earth's harshest deserts lie some of nature's most stunning treasures. Desert gemstones form through millions of years of intense heat, crushing pressure, and mineral-rich water flowing through underground caverns. It's like Mother Nature's own jewelry workshop, except the manufacturing time makes your grandmother's antique ring look brand new. The Sahara Desert produces some of the world's most beautiful agates. These striped beauties form when silica-rich water seeps through volcanic rock layers over countless centuries. Each band tells a story of ancient floods, droughts, and geological shifts that happened before humans even existed. Then there's turquoise, the signature stone of American Southwest deserts. This blue-green gem forms when copper deposits meet aluminum and phosphorus in just the right conditions. Ancient peoples considered it more valuable than gold, and honestly, they weren't wrong. But here's what gets really interesting. Desert roses. These aren't flowers at all, but gypsum crystals that naturally arrange themselves into petal-like formations. They literally grow in the sand like stone flowers, created by underground water, evaporating and leaving behind these incredible sculptures. Prospectors still roam desert regions today, following ancient dry riverbeds and scanning rocky outcrops for glints of hidden treasure. The thrill of finding your first desert gemstone never gets old. Speaking of desert treasures, wait until you discover the Zen masters hiding right under our noses. Desert lizards are basically the Zen masters of the animal kingdom, and they don't even know it. These little cold-blooded philosophers have perfected the art of stillness in ways that would make meditation gurus jealous. Watch a bearded dragon on a sun-warmed rock. It'll sit there for hours, absolutely motionless, like it's contemplating the meaning of existence. Well, sort of. What it's actually doing is thermoregulation. Fancy talk for temperature control. But honestly, the effect is identical to deep meditation. Desert lizards can't generate their own body heat like we can. Instead, they've mastered the art of strategic positioning. Morning sun. They'll angle their bodies to catch maximum warmth. Too hot? They'll seek shade faster than you'd flee a boring meeting. The patience required is extraordinary. A gecko hunting insects might remain perfectly still for 20 minutes, waiting for the exact right moment to strike. No fidgeting, no checking phones, just pure, focused presence. Their hunting strategy teaches us something profound about patience. They don't waste energy on unnecessary movement. Every action has purpose. Every pause serves a function. It's efficiency meets mindfulness, desert style. These cold-blooded creatures have turned energy conservation into an art form. But their thermal management skills pale in comparison to how humans have learned to work with desert heat through architecture. Desert peoples figured out something incredible thousands of years ago. While everyone else was fighting the heat, they learned to dance with it. Traditional desert architecture isn't just about staying cool. It's about creating harmony between human comfort and brutal climate. Take adobe construction, for instance. Those thick mud brick walls aren't just cheap building materials. They're thermal batteries that absorb heat during scorching days and release it slowly during chilly desert nights. But here's what really blows my mind: the courtyard system. Ancient desert builders created these open-air rooms in the center of homes that work like natural air conditioners. Hot air rises from the courtyard, creating suction that pulls cooler air through the surrounding rooms. No electricity needed, just pure physics and patience. Then there's the genius of wind towers. Those tall structures that catch even the slightest breeze and funnel it down into living spaces. Persian desert cities still use these cooling systems that are over 1,000 years old. They work better than most modern air conditioning, honestly. The beauty lies in working with nature instead of against it. These builders understood that the desert wasn't their enemy. It was their partner in creating comfortable homes. Speaking of partnerships with nature, wait until you discover what happens when desert minerals create Earth's most stunning natural mirrors. Picture walking across what looks like a giant mirror stretching to the horizon. Salt flats are basically nature's way of creating the world's most perfect reflective surface. And trust me, the result is absolutely mind-blowing. These incredible formations happen when ancient lakes dry up completely, leaving behind thick layers of pure salt. The Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia covers over 4,000 square miles of perfectly flat salt crystals. During dry season, it looks like you're walking on clouds. But here's where things get magical. When a thin layer of water covers the surface during rainy season, it becomes the ultimate mirror. The salt crystals form these amazing geometric patterns that look like someone spent years creating the world's largest honeycomb. Walking across them makes this soft crunching sound that's weirdly satisfying, like stepping on the world's most expensive breakfast cereal. What makes salt flats so peaceful? The complete flatness creates this sense of infinite space that naturally calms your mind. There's something about standing in a place where you can see the curve of the earth that puts everything into perspective. Ancient travelers used these salt highways as navigation landmarks. Smart move, considering they're visible from space. But the real magic happens when the sun sets over these crystalline surfaces, creating light shows that would make any meditation guru jealous. Speaking of desert relaxation spots, wait until you hear about natural hot springs bubbling up from underground. Desert springs bubble up from the earth like nature's own surprise parties. These hidden water sources appear in the most unlikely places, sometimes after traveling underground for hundreds of miles. The water starts its journey in distant mountains, seeping through layers of rock and sand, carrying minerals that turn ordinary water into something almost magical. Hot springs in deserts are particularly fascinating. The same geological forces that create harsh, dry landscapes also heat underground water to perfect bathing temperatures. Ancient Romans would have been jealous of some desert hot springs that maintain a steady 98 degrees year-round. No fancy heating systems required. But here's what's really cool about desert springs. They create their own little ecosystems. Palm trees suddenly appear where you'd least expect them. Birds show up out of nowhere. Fish somehow survive in tiny pools, hundreds of miles from the nearest river. It's like finding a secret garden behind a bookshelf. Indigenous peoples built entire civilizations around these water sources. They understood that springs weren't just about drinking water. Many cultures believed desert springs had healing properties. And honestly, they might have been onto something. The mineral content in spring water can be incredibly beneficial. These oases don't just provide water, though. They create psychological relief zones where desert travelers could finally relax. Speaking of relaxation, the gentle sounds these springs make are absolutely perfect for. Tucked away in desert monasteries and hidden caves, something extraordinary happened over thousands of years. Ancient manuscripts survived in perfect condition, thanks to the desert's bone-dry air acting like nature's own preservation system. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found in desert caves. Buddhist texts from the Silk Road, preserved in desert sands for centuries. Makes sense, right? While coastal libraries battled humidity and mold, desert scholars had stumbled upon the ultimate storage solution. Here's what's fascinating. Some of these desert libraries were completely accidental. Merchants would abandon books during sandstorms, only for archaeologists to find them centuries later, pages still crisp and readable. It's like the desert became a massive time capsule for human knowledge. But the intentional libraries were even more remarkable. Monks in places like Egypt's desert monasteries created copying centers where scribes worked in cool underground chambers. They'd wake before dawn, work during the gentle morning hours, then rest during the blazing afternoon heat. The rhythm was perfect for preserving both books and sanity. The really clever part? Desert librarians learned to use the dry conditions to their advantage, creating storage systems that worked with the climate instead of fighting it. These weren't just book collections, they were knowledge sanctuaries. Speaking of desert preservation magic, wait until you discover how these same dry conditions created the world's most incredible natural aromatherapy. Desert air carries secrets that would make any aromatherapy enthusiast jealous. When rain finally hits those sun-baked landscapes, something magical happens. The earth releases a scent called petrichor, that sweet, almost metallic smell that makes you want to breathe deeper. But here's what most people don't know. Desert plants have been creating natural aromatherapy for thousands of years. Creosote bushes release a distinctive, almost medicinal scent after rainfall. Some folks say it smells like old books, mixed with clean laundry. Weird combo, but surprisingly soothing. Then there's desert sage, which releases calming oils even without rain. Native peoples figured this out long before anyone invented essential oil diffusers. They'd burn sage bundles, letting those natural oils work their magic on frazzled nerves. Desert lavender takes things up a notch. Unlike its garden cousins, this hardy plant concentrates its oils to survive harsh conditions. The result? Aromatherapy that's 3 times more potent than regular lavender. Nature's way of making sure every drop counts. Even stranger, desert broom produces a honey-like fragrance that peaks right at sunset. Perfect timing for evening relaxation, don't you think? These natural scents work because desert plants don't waste energy on flashy flowers. Instead, they pour everything into creating these powerful, therapeutic oils. Speaking of desert timing, there's something equally fascinating about how ancient peoples learned to live with these rhythms. Desert nomads figured out something most of us never will: how to live with almost nothing and feel completely free. These wandering masters carried their entire lives on camelback. No mortgage payments, no cluttered closets, no "where did I put my keys" moments. Everything they owned had a purpose. Makes you wonder who's really living the dream here. But here's what's fascinating about nomadic wisdom. They developed hospitality customs that put five-star hotels to shame. A stranger arriving at a desert tent would receive the best food, the most comfortable sleeping spot, and complete protection for 3 days. No questions asked, no credit check required. The Bedouins have a saying, the guest is a blessing from God for 3 days. After that, well, maybe it's time to find your own tent. Their relationship with possessions was pure genius. Instead of accumulating stuff, they accumulated knowledge, star navigation, water finding techniques, weather prediction skills. You can't lose this kind of wealth to thieves or sandstorms. Desert nomads also mastered the art of patience. They understood that fighting the desert meant losing. Working with it meant surviving. The freedom they found wasn't from having everything. It came from needing very little. Speaking of needs, wait until you discover what desert peoples created using just plants and minerals around them. Picture yourself sitting with a Berber grandmother in Morocco, her weathered hands moving rhythmically through camel wool as she creates patterns passed down through 40 generations. Desert textiles aren't just fabric, they're portable stories, carrying the wisdom of nomads who turned harsh landscapes into art. These master weavers used everything the desert gave them. Sheep wool from hardy flocks that grazed on sparse desert grasses. Goat hair so strong it could withstand sandstorms. Even silk from wild desert cocoons, creating threads that shimmered like mirages. But here's what's fascinating. The colors came straight from the earth beneath their feet. Red ochre from iron-rich desert soils. Deep indigo from desert plants that hoarded precious blue pigments. Golden yellows extracted from desert flowers that bloomed for just days each year. The weaving itself became meditation. Hours spent creating geometric patterns that mirrored sand dune ripples and star formations. Each knot tied with the patience only desert dwellers truly understand. No rushing, no shortcuts. These textiles served as maps too. Specific patterns indicated water sources or safe passages through treacherous terrain. A blanket wasn't just warmth. It was survival knowledge wrapped in beauty. The rhythmic clicking of wooden looms created its own desert music. Hypnotic, soothing, the kind of sound that naturally slows your breathing and quiets racing thoughts. Speaking of natural rhythms, wait until you discover the incredible underground cities that desert peoples carved directly into the earth itself. Deep beneath the scorching Sahara lies an entire city that most people have never heard of. The underground settlement of Matmata in Tunisia isn't just a tourist attraction. It's a masterclass in desert survival that's been perfecting itself for over 1,500 years. These aren't your typical basement apartments either. Families carved entire courtyards straight down into the earth, creating natural air conditioning that would make modern engineers jealous. The temperature stays around 70 degrees year-round, while surface temperatures hit 120. Talk about beating the heat without an electric bill. But here's where it gets really clever. Each underground home connects to others through tunnels, creating entire neighborhoods that exist completely below ground. Kids literally grow up playing in courtyards that are 30 feet underground, surrounded by cave rooms that stay perfectly cool. The Berber people who created these spaces understood something we're just rediscovering. Earth is the ultimate insulation. Dig down just 10 feet, and you've escaped the desert's mood swings entirely. No blazing sun, no freezing nights, just consistent comfort. Even more fascinating, some of these underground cities in Turkey house 20,000 people. Imagine entire civilizations thriving beneath the desert, completely hidden from the surface world. Speaking of hidden desert wonders, there's something equally amazing growing right above ground that most people walk right past. Desert plants aren't just surviving out there, they're running their own pharmacy. These botanical chemists have been perfecting their healing recipes for thousands of years, and the results are pretty incredible. Take aloe vera, the ultimate desert first aid kit. This spiky succulent doesn't just look cool sitting in your kitchen window. When you break open those thick leaves, you get a gel that's basically nature's burn cream. Desert peoples figured this out long before we had fancy medical labs. Then there's the prickly pear cactus. Yeah, the one covered in nasty spines. But those paddle-shaped segments, they're packed with compounds that help regulate blood sugar. Indigenous communities have been using them for centuries to treat diabetes symptoms. Pretty smart for a plant that looks like it wants to stab you. The desert's harsh conditions actually make these plants stronger medicine. When water is scarce and the sun is brutal, plants concentrate their healing compounds. It's like nature's way of making super concentrated vitamins. Jojoba bushes produce an oil that's so similar to human skin oil, your face can't tell the difference. Desert rose extract soothes inflammation. Even that scraggly creosote bush has antiseptic properties. But here's what really gets interesting. Ancient desert dwellers didn't just stumble upon these remedies randomly. Dawn in the desert arrives like a gentle whisper, not the jarring alarm clock of city mornings. The sun doesn't just pop up. It slowly paints the sky in layers of coral, amber, and soft purple that would make any artist weep with envy. Here's what makes desert sunrise meditation so perfect. The temperature sits in that sweet spot between cool night air and the coming heat. Your body naturally relaxes into this perfect climate zone. Ancient desert peoples knew this golden hour was sacred time. The Bedouins called it the hour of contemplation. Smart folks, really. They'd wake before dawn, spread their prayer rugs on the still cool sand, and watch the world transform. No rushing, no stress, just breathing and being present as light slowly crept across endless dunes. But here's the fascinating part about desert dawn colors. All that dust and dry air acts like nature's own filter, breaking sunlight into the most incredible spectrum you'll ever see. The light bounces off sand particles, creating this ethereal glow that seems to come from everywhere at once. Traditional Tibetan monks who lived in high desert regions developed specific breathing techniques timed to sunrise progression. They'd inhale as colors deepened, exhale as shadows shortened. Pure genius. Then there's something even more mysterious happening as morning unfolds. Those same mathematical patterns that create such precise beauty. The desert floor might look like chaos, but it's actually one of nature's most precise mathematicians. Those seemingly random patterns in cracked mud. Pure hexagonal perfection. The same six-sided shapes you'd find in a honeycomb, created by nothing but drying earth and physics. Desert plants follow the golden ratio, like they've got geometry textbooks hidden in their roots. Cactus spirals, agave arrangements, even the way desert flowers position their petals. It's all following mathematical formulas that would make your high school math teacher weep with joy. Well, assuming they didn't faint from the heat first. Then there's the incredible precision of sand dune formations. Wind doesn't just randomly pile up sand. It creates perfectly calculated slopes, always at 34 degrees, the exact angle where sand naturally settles. Any steeper, and it slides down. Any gentler, and it won't hold. Desert winds have been unconsciously solving engineering problems for millions of years. But here's what really blows my mind. Dry desert lake beds create polygonal patterns that look like giant puzzle pieces. These formations can stretch for miles, each polygon fitting together with mathematical precision that rivals the most complex architectural blueprints. The desert's mathematical obsession extends even deeper underground, where crystal formations grow in perfect geometric shapes that seem almost too organized to be natural. Long before Amazon delivered packages in 2 days, desert traders were moving precious cargo across thousands of miles with nothing but camels and incredible patience. These ancient merchants didn't rush. They couldn't. The desert taught them that speed kills, but steady persistence creates empires. Silk from China took 18 months to reach European markets via desert routes. 18 months. Can you imagine waiting that long for anything today? But here's what's fascinating. That slow journey made silk more valuable than gold by the time it arrived. Desert traders carried frankincense from Arabia, jade from Central Asia, and spices that were literally worth their weight in silver. The longer the journey, the more precious the cargo became. It's like the desert was adding value with every grain of sand crossed. These merchants developed an almost Zen-like approach to commerce. They knew that rushing across the Sahara or Gobi meant death, so they embraced what we'd call extreme slow living. Rest during scorching days, travel by moonlight, stop for every oasis, no matter how small the delay. The really clever part: desert traders created the world's first international banking system. They'd deposit goods in one city and withdraw them hundreds of miles away using primitive credit systems. But the most remarkable desert trade wasn't in precious metals or exotic spices. Desert cooking might sound like an oxymoron, but these dry landscapes actually birthed some of humanity's most ingenious culinary techniques. When fuel is scarce and water precious, creativity becomes the main ingredient. Ancient desert peoples mastered the art of earth oven cooking long before anyone invented the slow cooker. They'd dig pits, line them with stones, build fires inside, then remove the coals and bury their food. The retained heat would cook meals for hours using zero additional fuel. Basically, the original set-it-and-forget-it method. But here's where desert cooking gets really clever. Those harsh conditions that seem impossible, they're actually natural food processors. The intense dry heat concentrates flavors like nothing else. Desert herbs pack 10 times the punch of their temperate cousins. A single sprig of desert sage could season an entire pot. Traditional Bedouin cooks learned to create complex layered flavors using minimal ingredients. They'd wrap meat in aromatic desert plants, bury it in sand near their fires, and let the gentle, consistent heat work its magic overnight. The result? Incredibly tender, perfectly seasoned meals that put modern slow cooking to shame. Even more fascinating, many dessert cultures develop fermentation techniques that actually improve nutrition while using less water than conventional cooking methods. Speaking of water conservation, wait until you discover how these same desert masters created elaborate flavor combinations using just morning dew. Sandstone formations are basically Earth's autobiography written in stone. These towering red cliffs and delicate arches tell stories spanning millions of years, layer by colorful layer. The gorgeous reds, oranges, and yellows come from iron oxide, basically rust mixed into ancient sand. When iron-rich water seeped through buried sand dunes ages ago, it painted each grain like a tiny sunset. Different iron concentrations created different shades, which is why you see those beautiful striped patterns in canyon walls. What's really amazing, these massive formations started as simple beach sand or desert dunes. Over time, they got buried under more sediment, compressed, and cemented together grain by grain. The original ripple marks from ancient winds are still visible in many sandstone surfaces today. Then there's the patient artistry of erosion. Water and wind spend thousands of years carving these masterpieces, creating natural windows, arches, and sculptures that would make any artist jealous. The process is so gentle that delicate features can survive for centuries. Some sandstone formations even preserve dinosaur tracks and ancient plant fossils. Walking through these stone galleries feels like flipping through Earth's photo album. But here's what makes sandstone really special. It breathes. The porous rock expands and contracts with temperature changes, creating tiny crackling sounds at dawn and dusk. Speaking of tiny architects, wait until you discover what desert insects build with their engineering skills. You know what's truly mind-blowing? Desert insects are basically tiny architects running air conditioning companies in the middle of nowhere. These little engineers put human construction to shame. Take desert termites. They build towers that can reach 10 feet tall, complete with ventilation systems that would make modern HVAC technicians weep with envy. The inside stays a perfect 78 degrees, while outside temperatures swing from freezing to scorching. How? They create vertical wind tunnels that naturally pull hot air up and out, while drawing cool air down through underground chambers. But here's where it gets wild. Desert ants don't just build random tunnels. They calculate precise angles for their underground highways, creating multi-level parking garages that prevent traffic jams during peak foraging hours. Some species even build separate entrance and exit ramps. Desert bees take it further. They construct hexagonal cells with mathematical perfection, using desert wax that stays solid in 100-degree heat. Their colonies feature temperature-controlled nurseries, food storage areas with climate control, and even waste management systems. The construction materials? Pure genius. Termites mix their own saliva with sand to create concrete stronger than anything humans made until the 20th century. These insects figured out sustainable architecture millions of years before we even discovered fire. Speaking of ancient wisdom, wait until you hear how desert animals mastered survival techniques that boggle the mind. Desert animals are basically evolution's overachievers. These creatures have mastered survival techniques that would make a Navy SEAL jealous. Take the fennec fox. Those oversized ears aren't just adorable, they're heat radiators. Blood vessels close to the skin surface release excess body heat, keeping their core temperature perfectly stable. It's like having built-in air conditioning that never breaks down. Kangaroo rats might win the water conservation championship, though. They can live their entire lives without drinking a single drop of water. Their kidneys are so efficient, they produce urine 4 times more concentrated than humans. They literally squeeze every molecule of moisture from their food and recycle their own. Breath humidity. Talk about waste not. want not. But here's where desert animals get really clever. Behavioral adaptations. Most become masters of the siesta lifestyle. Roadrunners hunt during cool morning hours, then find shade and basically become living statues until evening. Even their heart rate slows down to conserve energy. Desert bighorn sheep have GPS-level memory for water sources. They remember every hidden spring and seasonal pool across hundreds of square miles, passing this knowledge through generations like a family treasure map. The real genius lies in their patience. Every movement is calculated, every action purposeful. No wasted energy, no rushed decisions. Speaking of purposeful movements, desert insects have turned architectural engineering into pure art. Ancient desert walls tell stories that would make any art museum jealous. These aren't your typical gallery paintings hanging behind velvet ropes. We're talking about masterpieces created thousands of years ago, painted directly onto rock faces using nothing but local minerals and incredible patience. Desert peoples discovered something amazing about their harsh environment. The same dry conditions that made survival challenging also created perfect art preservation. While paintings in humid climates cracked and faded, desert rock art stayed vibrant for millennia. Talk about finding the silver lining in a tough situation. The pigments came straight from the desert floor. Red ochre from iron-rich soil. White from crushed gypsum. Black from charcoal and manganese. Yellow from clay deposits. Artists literally walked their landscape to gather their paint supplies. No art store needed. But here's what's really fascinating. Many of these paintings were created in caves and sheltered alcoves that stay naturally cool even during scorching days. Ancient artists found the perfect studios with built-in air conditioning, courtesy of desert geology. The steady hand required for detailed petroglyphs, desert life taught that patience naturally. When you're used to waiting months for rain, spending hours perfecting a single painted figure feels normal. These desert galleries hold astronomical charts, hunting scenes, and spiritual symbols. Each stroke captured the rhythm of desert existence. Speaking of natural rhythms, deserts follow their own calendar. Deserts aren't frozen in time like most people think. They breathe with seasons just as much as any forest or meadow, but their changes whisper instead of shout. The Sonoran Desert transforms completely between winter and summer. December brings gentle rains that awaken dormant seeds buried for years. Suddenly, carpets of wildflowers explode across the landscape. Purple lupines dance with orange poppies, while yellow brittlebush creates golden meadows where sand once ruled. But here's what's fascinating. Desert peoples developed calendars based on these subtle shifts. The Tohono O'odham tracked 13 lunar months by watching when different cacti bloomed. Beryl cactus flowers meant summer heat was coming. Palo Verde blossoms signaled the perfect time for planting. Ancient Egyptians noticed how the desert winds changed direction with seasons. Cool northern breezes in winter gave way to scorching southern winds in summer. They built their homes to catch those winter winds and deflect the harsh summer ones. Even temperatures follow rhythms that desert dwellers learn to read like sheet music. Winter nights might drop to near freezing, while days stay pleasantly warm. Summer flips this script. Blazing days followed by surprisingly cool nights. The patience required to notice these gentle cycles taught desert cultures something profound about time itself. They learned to work with nature's rhythm instead of fighting it. Speaking of working with natural forces, desert winds create their own predictable patterns that ancient peoples turned into. Desert bees are basically the overachievers of the insect world. While their cousins in temperate climates are sipping nectar from convenient flower buffets, desert bees are out there making liquid gold from the toughest plants on Earth. These tiny warriors collect nectar from cactus flowers that bloom for maybe 12 hours. Talk about working under pressure. The resulting honey tastes like nothing you've ever experienced. Mesquite honey has a molasses-like richness. Palo Verde honey carries hints of vanilla. And creosote bush honey, well, that's an acquired taste that locals swear by for sore throats. Ancient desert peoples figured out that desert honey never spoils. Ever. Archaeologists have found pots of perfectly edible honey in Egyptian tombs thousands of years old. The dry desert air and natural preservatives in desert flowers create honey that's basically immortal. Here's what's wild, though. Desert bees don't just make honey differently. They live differently. They've learned to work during those precious cool morning hours when flowers release their nectar. By noon, when the sun turns brutal, they're already back home counting their winnings. Traditional beekeepers in places like Morocco and Arizona still use clay hives that naturally regulate temperature. The bees stay cool while their honey develops those complex desert flavors. But desert honey isn't just about taste. The concentrated minerals and unique plant compounds create something that moves through the air itself in fascinating ways. Desert winds aren't just random air movement. They're nature's most predictable daily dance. Every morning, cool air settles into valleys and low areas. As the sun heats the sand and rocks, warm air rises like invisible elevators. This creates steady, reliable wind patterns that desert peoples have relied on for thousands of years. The Tuareg nomads of the Sahara plan their entire travel schedules around these air currents. Morning winds blow from the east, afternoon winds shift west, and evening brings the gentle cooling breeze that makes desert nights so peaceful. It's like having a natural air conditioning system that never breaks down. But here's what gets really interesting. Desert winds carry a consistent rhythm that actually helps regulate your breathing. The steady whoosh creates what acoustics experts call pink noise, the same frequency that helps people fall into deeper sleep. Ancient Persian architects figured this out centuries ago. They built wind towers that channeled these predictable air currents through their buildings. Cool air gets pulled down into living spaces, while hot air exits through the top. Pure genius, using nothing but physics and patience. The Bedouins have over 30 different words for various desert wind patterns. Each one describes a specific time, temperature, and direction. Speaking of direction, these same winds have been carrying something else across deserts for millennia. Desert monasteries knew something special about creating peaceful spaces. These ancient retreat centers weren't just built randomly in the middle of nowhere. They were carefully designed meditation gardens that worked with the desert's natural calm. Buddhist and Christian monks chose desert locations for a reason. The harsh environment stripped away distractions, leaving only what truly mattered. But here's what's fascinating. They didn't fight against the desert conditions. They embraced them. Traditional desert monastery gardens used maybe 5 or 6 plant species total. Compare that to typical gardens with dozens of varieties competing for attention. Desert monks understood that simplicity creates deeper peace than complexity ever could. The layout followed desert logic too. Paths curved around natural rock formations instead of forcing straight lines. Water features were tiny but perfectly placed, a small fountain or shallow reflecting pool that caught morning light. The sound of trickling water in complete silence, pure magic. Many gardens included what they called contemplation stones, single large rocks positioned for sitting and watching the horizon. No fancy benches or elaborate structures, just stone, sand, and sky. The color palette stayed naturally muted. Earth tones, sage greens, and weathered wood created visual calm that didn't jar the senses. Everything flowed together like the desert itself had designed it. But wait until you discover the hidden crystal caves that lie beneath many of these desert sanctuaries. Deep beneath the scorching desert surface lies a world that would make any jewelry store weep with envy. Crystal caves hidden in desert regions contain some of Earth's most breathtaking mineral formations, preserved perfectly by the bone-dry conditions above. The Naka Cave in Mexico's Chihuahuan desert houses crystals so massive they dwarf humans. We're talking selenite crystals the size of telephone poles. These giants took over 500,000 years to grow, forming an underground, chambers heated by magma below. The dry desert climate kept these delicate formations intact, while humid environments elsewhere would have dissolved them long ago. But here's what makes desert crystal caves truly magical: the silence. Underground chambers naturally muffle sound, creating spaces so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. Ancient peoples often used these caves as meditation retreats, believing the crystals amplified their spiritual practices. The temperature stays perfectly cool year-round, typically around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Many of these caves contain natural seating areas where smooth rock formations create comfortable spots for quiet contemplation. Some chambers even have natural skylights where tiny openings connect to the surface above. Desert crystal caves often feature multiple rooms connected by narrow passages, each revealing new formations and colors. The interplay of filtered sunlight and crystal surfaces creates an almost otherworldly calm. Speaking of natural timekeepers, deserts have always provided perfect conditions for tracking time through shadows and celestial movements. Desert peoples figured out something we're still catching up to today. They turned the sun itself into the world's most reliable timekeeper, using nothing but shadows and stone. Long before anyone dreamed of digital clocks, ancient desert dwellers were masters of precision timekeeping. They carved sundials into rock faces and built stone markers that tracked time with incredible accuracy. The clear, consistent sunlight made deserts perfect natural laboratories for understanding how shadows move. But here's what's really clever about desert timekeeping. These weren't just practical tools. They were works of art that doubled as community gathering spaces. People would meet at the sundial to plan their day, knowing exactly when the scorching heat would peak and when blessed evening would arrive. Desert cultures developed what you might call shadow wisdom. They could tell time by looking at the length of their own shadow, or by watching how light fell across familiar rocks. Children learned to read the desert like a giant clock face, understanding that survival often depended on perfect timing. The mathematical precision of these ancient timepieces still amazes engineers today. Some desert sundials from thousands of years ago are accurate to within minutes. Well, speaking of desert precision, wait until you discover how these patient animals became the ultimate philosophers of the sandy wilderness. Camels possess an almost supernatural ability to pace themselves through the harshest environments on Earth. Their internal rhythm operates on what desert peoples call camel time, a deliberate, measured approach that makes marathon journeys possible. These remarkable animals naturally understand something most humans struggle with: the art of sustainable effort. A camel won't rush. It can't be hurried beyond its optimal pace, no matter how much you prod or cajole. This isn't stubbornness, it's pure wisdom. Their breathing naturally synchronizes with their walking rhythm, creating a meditative cadence that's both hypnotic and efficient. Each step conserves energy while covering maximum ground. Desert nomads learned to match this rhythm, discovering that fighting the camel's pace led to exhaustion, while embracing it brought unexpected peace. The relationship between desert peoples and camels goes deeper than transportation. Bedouins speak of their camels as philosophical companions, creatures that teach patience through example. A camel's steady breathing during rest periods actually helps lower human stress levels. Their calm presence naturally slows heart rates. These animals demonstrate what psychologists now call embodied mindfulness. They're completely present in each moment, neither rushing toward destinations nor dwelling on the journey behind them. Their large, contemplative eyes seem to hold centuries of desert wisdom. But the real magic happens when you discover how camels navigate using celestial patterns. The ancient Silk Road wasn't just one route. It was actually a sprawling network of pathways that connected civilizations across thousands of miles, and many of these crucial arteries ran straight through the world's harshest deserts. But here's what made these desert routes special. They weren't just about moving goods. They became highways of peace, cultural exchange, and diplomatic wisdom that lasted for centuries. Desert travel naturally forces cooperation. When you're crossing the Gobi or navigating the Arabian Peninsula, survival trumps everything else. Rival merchants would share water sources, pool resources during sandstorms, and help each other navigate treacherous terrain. The desert didn't care about your politics or religion. It treated everyone equally harshly. These trade routes developed their own diplomatic protocols. Caravanserais, those fortified rest stops, became neutral territories where different cultures mingled freely. A Persian trader might share tea with a Chinese merchant while listening to stories from an Arab navigator. Everyone learned everyone else's language, at least enough to negotiate and joke around the campfire. The desert's slow pace encouraged deep conversations too. When you're walking for weeks alongside the same group, you end up discussing philosophy, sharing family stories, and forming genuine friendships. Many peace treaties were actually hammered out during these long desert journeys. Well, speaking of desert phenomena that bring wonder to nighttime travel. Picture standing in a desert at midnight when the rarest light show begins. Moonbows appear when moonlight hits water droplets in the air, creating ghostly rainbows that seem to float in the darkness. These lunar rainbows happen maybe once a year in most deserts. The conditions have to be perfect. You need a bright full moon, tiny water droplets from rare desert rain, and crystal clear air that only deserts provide. It's like winning the weather lottery 3 times at once. But here's what makes desert moonbows truly magical. They appear almost colorless to our eyes. While regular rainbows burst with vivid colors, moonbows look like silver arcs painted across the night sky. Our eyes can't detect the subtle colors in moonlight the way cameras can. It's nature's way of creating the most peaceful light display imaginable. Ancient desert peoples considered moonbows messages from the spirit world. They'd gather in silence, watching these ethereal arcs fade in and out of existence. The Sahara has legends about moonbows leading lost travelers to water sources. The whole phenomenon lasts maybe 20 minutes before vanishing completely. No thunder, no drama, just a gentle silver bridge appearing between earth and sky. Makes sense why desert dwellers found them so calming, right? These fleeting displays remind us that deserts hold secrets that reveal themselves only to the most patient observers. Speaking of patient observation, desert peoples developed some pretty ingenious ways to read their environment. Japanese Zen gardens borrowed their entire philosophy from desert landscapes. Those perfectly raked sand patterns that look so sophisticated. Desert winds have been creating identical designs for millions of years. The ancient art of arranging stones in contemplative spaces came directly from desert peoples who understood something profound. When you have nothing but rocks, sand, and endless space, you learn to see beauty in the simplest arrangements. Desert nomads would create temporary meditation spaces using just 3 stones and some smooth sand. But here's what's fascinating about desert rock arrangements. The stones aren't randomly placed. Desert cultures develop precise rules about spacing, height, and orientation that maximize the calming effect on human psychology. They discovered that certain triangular formations naturally slow down breathing and heart rate. Traditional desert monasteries took this even further. Monks would spend decades perfecting single rock gardens, moving stones by mere inches over years until the arrangement achieved perfect harmony. Some gardens were so effective at inducing meditative states that visitors would fall asleep within minutes of sitting nearby. The raked sand patterns serve a deeper purpose too. The repetitive lines mirror the natural wind patterns that create those mesmerizing ripples across desert dunes. Your brain recognizes these patterns as fundamentally peaceful because they represent the patient, eternal work of wind on sand. Speaking of patient work, desert peoples discovered that the very act of creating these arrangements was as calming as viewing them. Long before smartphones and digital clocks, desert peoples became master timekeepers using nothing but sand, stars, and shadows. These weren't your average calendar makers either. They developed systems so precise they could predict seasons, plan harvests, and navigate vast emptiness with stunning accuracy. The ancient Egyptians practically invented our modern year by watching how the desert horizon shifted throughout seasons. But here's what's fascinating. They didn't just count days. They noticed how certain stars appeared exactly when the Nile would flood, turning astronomical observation into agricultural survival. Desert nomads took this further. They created portable calendars using stick arrangements and stone markers. No bulky equipment needed. Just patient observation of how celestial bodies moved across those crystal-clear desert skies. Then there's the Antikythera mechanism's desert cousins, simple wooden devices that could predict eclipses and track planetary movements. Desert astronomers figured out Mars's orbit centuries before telescopes existed. Makes you wonder what we've forgotten about reading nature's signs, right? The Bedouins developed an intricate system using camel behavior, wind patterns, and star positions to create incredibly accurate seasonal calendars. They could tell you exactly when to move camps, when water sources would replenish, and when dangerous sandstorms approached. But perhaps their greatest achievement was understanding that time itself moves differently in desert spaces. Desert environments have been quietly revolutionizing health treatments for centuries, and doctors are finally catching up to what ancient healers already knew. Tuberculosis, patients in the early 1900s were literally shipped to desert sanatoriums because the dry air worked better than most medicines available at the time. The magic happens in your respiratory system. Desert air contains almost zero humidity, which means your lungs don't have to work overtime processing moisture. Each breath becomes cleaner, deeper, more efficient. People with asthma often experience dramatic relief within hours of arriving in desert climates. Then there's the psychological reset button that deserts seem to press automatically. The vast open spaces trigger something primal in our brains, a kind of mental exhale that's impossible to replicate in crowded cities. Your cortisol levels drop naturally when surrounded by endless horizons. Ancient Egyptian healing temples were built in desert locations for good reason. They understood that isolation from distractions, combined with dry heat and mineral-rich environments, created perfect conditions for recovery. The Romans later copied this approach, establishing their own desert retreat centers. Modern research confirms what traditional healers suspected. Desert environments reduce inflammation, improve circulation, and promote deeper sleep patterns. The constant gentle warmth acts like a full-body heating pad that never switches off. But perhaps the most fascinating healing element lies hidden beneath the surface, where ancient rivers once carved. Wandering through most deserts today, you'll notice something peculiar. These seemingly barren landscapes are actually crisscrossed with gentle, meandering channels that look like riverbeds. But here's what's fascinating. Many haven't seen water for thousands of years. These fossil rivers tell incredible stories about ancient climates. The Sahara Desert? It used to be a lush, green paradise with flowing rivers just 6,000 years ago. Those dry washes you see weren't carved by wind. They're the ghostly remains of mighty waterways that once supported entire civilizations. What really gets me is how perfectly preserved these ancient channels are. Desert air acts like nature's own time capsule, keeping every curve and bend exactly as the water left them. Some of these dry riverbeds stretch for hundreds of miles, creating natural highways that desert travelers have used for millennia. The beauty of these fossil rivers isn't just historical. They create the most peaceful walking paths, with their smooth, sandy bottoms and gentle slopes. Desert nomads knew this secret well. Following these ancient waterways was like having a built-in GPS system across endless dunes. But here's where it gets really interesting. Some of these dead rivers aren't quite as lifeless as they appear. Underground, water still flows along the same ancient paths. Desert spices pack more punch than you'd ever expect. The harsh, dry conditions don't just preserve flavor. They concentrate it into something almost magical. Take cumin, for instance. Those tiny seeds grown in desert regions contain oils so potent that just a pinch can transform an entire dish. Why? Well, when plants struggle for water, they compensate by packing their essential oils tighter. It's like nature's way of saying, if I'm going to survive this heat, I'm going to make it count. Ancient spice traders knew this secret well. They'd trek across scorching sand dunes, specifically hunting for desert-grown herbs. These weren't just any herbs. They were flavor bombs that could preserve food for months without refrigeration. Desert peoples developed incredible preservation techniques using these concentrated spices. Salt from dried lake beds, mixed with local herbs, created natural refrigeration systems. Your grandmother's spice rack probably contains descendants of these desert survivors. The funny thing is, we spend fortunes on fancy spice blends today, but desert nomads were creating the original superfood seasonings centuries ago. They had to. Bland food simply wasn't an option when you're living off dried meat and stored grains. Each spice told a story of survival and ingenuity. But speaking of desert survival stories, wait until you discover the midnight magic that happens when certain desert flowers decide to bloom. The night-blooming cereus might just be the desert's greatest magician. This spectacular cactus flower waits all year for one perfect night to show off. And when it does, pure magic. Most desert flowers bloom during the day, competing for attention from bees and butterflies. But the cereus plays by different rules entirely. It saves its energy for darkness, creating blooms that would make any wedding florist weep with envy. The timing is everything. These flowers open exactly at midnight, releasing a fragrance so intoxicating it can be smelled from hundreds of yards away. The scent draws night-flying moths, like a dinner bell calls hungry kids. But here's where it gets wild. The entire show lasts only one night. By dawn, the magnificent bloom begins to wither. By the next evening, it's completely gone. Desert dwellers often host serious parties when they spot a bud about to bloom. Friends gather with lawn chairs and thermoses of coffee, watching nature's most exclusive midnight premiere. Some folks wait decades to witness this spectacle in person. The flower itself is breathtaking. Pure white petals unfurl like silk ribbons, revealing a golden center that glows in moonlight. It's roughly the size of a dinner plate, absolutely massive compared to the modest cactus that produces it. Speaking of timing, desert spices have mastered their own patient approach to flavor development. Desert weavers understood something most of us have forgotten. They didn't just make textiles, they captured entire landscapes in thread. These master craftspeople would sit for hours, fingers dancing across their looms, recreating the exact patterns they saw in windswept sand. The ripples left by desert breezes became the foundation for textile designs that could calm your mind just by looking at them. What's fascinating? Desert peoples figured out how to use literally everything around them. Yucca fibers became strong threads. Cactus spines turned into weaving needles. Even dried grass got woven into beautiful patterns that told stories about their homeland. The repetitive motions of weaving became a form of meditation. Back and forth, over and under. The rhythm naturally slowed breathing and quieted racing thoughts. Some weavers would spend months on a single piece, entering an almost trance-like state as geometric patterns emerged from their hands. Different desert tribes developed signature patterns. The Navajo created designs inspired by lightning and rain clouds. North African Berbers wove symbols representing oasis palms and shifting dunes. Each pattern held meaning, preserving cultural memory in portable art. Here's the beautiful part. These textiles served as mental maps. Nomadic families could look at their weavings during long journeys and remember exactly where home was. But desert weavers knew other secrets about working with natural materials. The desert floor might look lifeless, but dig down just a few inches and you'll discover an entire hidden metropolis. Billions of microscopic creatures live their entire lives in desert soil, creating complex ecosystems that rival any rainforest. Desert soil isn't just sand and rocks. It's actually alive with bacteria, fungi, and tiny animals called tardigrades. These microscopic water bears can survive complete dehydration for decades, then spring back to life the moment moisture appears. Talk about the ultimate patience. Then there are the cryptobiotic crusts. These living carpets of cyanobacteria, lichens, and mosses form protective layers across desert surfaces. They might look like ordinary dirt, but they're actually holding the entire desert ecosystem together. Without them, sand dunes would blow away and nothing could grow. Underground, desert ant colonies create elaborate tunnel systems that stay naturally cool. Some extend 20 feet deep, complete with nurseries, food storage chambers, and ventilation shafts. The engineering would make any architect jealous. Desert soil organisms have mastered the art of going dormant. When conditions get tough, they simply shut down all life processes and wait. Some can remain in this suspended state for over 50 years. While we're talking about patient desert dwellers, wait until you hear how desert sounds can actually change your brain waves and create natural meditation states. Ever wonder why your voice sounds different when you shout across a canyon? Deserts create some of the most fascinating acoustic phenomena on Earth, turning landscapes into natural sound studios. Desert canyons work like massive amplifiers. The dry air carries sound waves with incredible clarity, while smooth rock walls bounce them back and forth. Some canyon systems can create echoes that last for several seconds. Ancient peoples discovered this thousands of years ago and built their ceremonial sites specifically to take advantage of these acoustic sweet spots. But here's what gets really interesting. Certain desert formations create what acousticians call whispering galleries. Stand at one end of these natural amphitheaters and speak normally. Someone hundreds of feet away will hear you perfectly, as if you're right next to them. The curved rock walls focus sound waves like a lens focuses light. Then there's the meditation angle. Many desert monasteries and retreat centers were built in locations with specific acoustic properties. The natural sound dampening of open desert spaces, combined with strategic rock formations, creates perfect conditions for contemplation. Your breathing becomes more audible. Your heartbeat seems louder. Even your thoughts feel quieter. Desert peoples used these acoustic phenomena for healing ceremonies too. Drum beats and chanting would resonate through canyon walls, creating almost hypnotic sound experiences. Speaking of ancient wisdom, desert astronomers discovered something equally mesmerizing about their starry skies. Desert peoples didn't just look up at the stars for entertainment. They built some of humanity's most sophisticated astronomical observatories, right there in the sand. Take the Nabta Playa, stone circle in Egypt's Nubian desert. Built over 6,000 years ago, it predates Stonehenge by 1,000 years. These ancient astronomers arranged massive stones to track the summer solstice and map star positions with incredible accuracy. But here's what's fascinating about desert astronomy. The air is so dry and clear that ancient observers could see stars we can barely detect today with our light-polluted skies. They mapped constellations, predicted eclipses, and created calendars that governed everything from planting seasons to religious festivals. The Atacama Desert in Chile remains home to some of the world's most advanced telescopes today. Same reason the ancients chose these spots: zero humidity, minimal atmospheric disturbance, and 300 clear nights per year. Ancient Mesopotamians built ziggurats in desert regions specifically for star watching. These weren't just temples, they were sophisticated observation platforms where priest astronomers tracked planetary movements and lunar cycles. These desert stargazers developed mathematical concepts we still use today. They calculated the length of a year to within minutes of our modern measurements. Not bad for people working with stone tools and patient observation. Speaking of patient observation, desert peoples discovered something else remarkable about their clear night skies. Desert colors have been quietly revolutionizing how we see the world for thousands of years. Those warm earth tones aren't just pretty to look at. They're actually rewiring our brains to feel calmer. Ancient desert healers figured this out way before anyone invented color psychology. They noticed that spending time surrounded by sandy beiges, rust reds, and sage greens naturally lowered stress levels. Makes sense, right? These colors don't fight for your attention like bright neon signs. The Navajo people traditionally painted their healing ceremonies with pigments made from desert minerals. Ochre from iron-rich desert soils created those signature warm oranges and browns. They believed different desert colors could treat specific ailments. Red earth for energy, pale sand for peace of mind. Modern interior designers basically stole this ancient wisdom. Those trendy desert modern homes with their neutral palettes, they're copying what desert cultures perfected centuries ago. The colors literally tell your nervous system to chill out. But here's where it gets really interesting. Desert sunsets cycle through this entire healing palette in just 30 minutes. Pink to orange to deep purple to midnight blue. It's like nature's own color therapy session, happening automatically every single evening. The most fascinating part, though, how these same colors change completely when moonlight hits the sand dunes at night. Meet the desert tortoise, nature's ultimate meditation master. These gentle giants can live over 150 years, making them older than your great-great-grandmother's china set. While we're rushing around checking our phones every 30 seconds, they're perfecting the art of slow living. Desert tortoises spend about 95% of their lives underground in burrows they've dug themselves. Talk about commitment to personal space. They emerge only when necessary, moving at a whopping 0.3 miles per hour. That's slower than your internet on a bad day. What's fascinating is how they approach daily life. A desert tortoise doesn't stress about deadlines or worry about tomorrow's weather. They eat when hungry, rest when tired, and hibernate for months without checking social media once. Revolutionary concept, right? Their shells tell incredible stories too. Growth rings reveal decades of patient survival through droughts, floods, and temperature swings that would send most creatures packing. Yet they persist, unbothered and unrushed. Indigenous desert peoples considered these tortoises symbols of wisdom and endurance. They watched how tortoises conserved energy, moved deliberately, and never wasted motion. Smart teachers, those ancient shells. But here's what really gets interesting about desert longevity. It's not just the tortoises who've mastered this patient approach to existence. Desert cultures figured out something most of us are still learning. Less stuff equals more peace. Take the traditional Tuareg tent, for instance. Everything folds into a camel-sized package, yet it creates a comfortable home for an entire family. No mortgage payments, no utility bills, just brilliant engineering that works with the desert instead of fighting it. Their whole approach makes sense when you think about it. Why own 50 cooking pots when 3 perfectly crafted ones do everything you need? Desert nomads mastered this art centuries before minimalism became trendy on Instagram. But here's what's really clever. Desert homes stay naturally cool without air conditioning. Thick adobe walls absorb heat during scorching days, then release it slowly at night. Courtyards create their own little wind tunnels. Flat roofs become sleeping spaces under star-filled skies. The Bedouins have a saying, "A rich man is not one who has much, but one who needs little." Pretty wise for people living in some of Earth's harshest places, right? Even their furniture multitasks beautifully. Storage boxes become seats. Rugs define rooms that don't actually exist. Everything has at least 2 purposes, sometimes 3. This efficiency isn't just practical, it's liberating. When everything you own fits on a camel, moving becomes an adventure rather than a nightmare. Speaking of adventures, desert peoples discovered something magical about moving with the rhythm of nature itself. Buddhism teaches that everything changes. Nothing stays the same forever. Desert sand patterns prove this wisdom every single day, creating the most peaceful art gallery on Earth. Watch wind blow across a sand dune. Tiny grains dance and shift, forming perfect ripples that look like ocean waves frozen in time. These patterns appear mathematical, almost too perfect to be natural. But here's what's amazing. They'll be completely different tomorrow. Ancient Tibetan monks spend weeks creating intricate sand mandalas, knowing they'll destroy them when finished. Desert winds do the same thing, but on a massive scale. They sculpt elaborate patterns across entire dune fields, then erase everything with the next breeze. Native American tribes in the Southwest have practiced sand painting for centuries. They'd create healing ceremonies using colored sand, letting wind reclaim the art afterward. The temporary nature wasn't seen as loss. It was the whole point. Modern stress comes from wanting things to stay the same. Desert sand teaches us differently. Change isn't destruction, it's renewal. Every grain that moves makes space for new patterns to emerge. The Navajo have a saying, "Beauty before me, beauty behind me." They understood that letting go creates room for fresh beauty. Desert winds never stop moving sand around. But what happens when this same principle applies to the natural hot springs bubbling up through desert floors? Picture yourself sinking into naturally heated water while surrounded by endless sand dunes. Desert hot springs are Earth's way of providing luxury spas in the most unexpected places. These geothermal wonders bubble up from deep underground, where water gets heated by the planet's core before making its journey to the surface. The Mojave Desert alone has over 50 natural hot springs scattered across its landscape. Talk about hitting the jackpot in the middle of nowhere. What makes desert hot springs extra special? The mineral content is absolutely incredible. We're talking about water loaded with lithium, magnesium, and sulfur. Basically, a natural pharmacy that's been brewing underground for thousands of years. Ancient peoples knew this secret long before modern spas became trendy. The Cahuilla tribe in Southern California considered these springs sacred healing waters. They'd travel for days just to soak in what they called agua caliente, hot water. Smart folks, if you ask me. Here's what's wild about desert springs. They maintain perfect temperatures year-round. While the desert air might be scorching at 110 degrees or freezing at 30, that spring water stays consistently warm at around 104 degrees Fahrenheit. But the real magic happens at night, when desert temperatures drop and steam rises from the water like ghostly fingers reaching toward the stars. Desert highways weren't built with bulldozers and concrete. Ancient desert peoples carved paths using pure patience and brilliant observation. These routes followed natural contours, avoided dangerous terrain, and connected water sources with mathematical precision. The engineering was subtle but genius. Instead of fighting the landscape, they worked with it. Rocky areas provided stable footing during rare flash floods. Higher ground caught cooling breezes. Strategic placement meant travelers could find shade during the brutal midday hours. Rest stops weren't random either. Every 12 to 15 miles, ancient engineers established way stations. Why that distance? It's exactly how far a loaded camel can comfortably walk between extended breaks. These weren't just camping spots. They were carefully planned recovery zones with wind barriers, emergency water caches, and repair facilities for damaged goods. The roads themselves tell fascinating stories. Some routes show wear patterns from thousands of years of use. Certain stones are polished smooth from countless sandaled feet and camel hooves. You can still trace these ancient highways using satellite imagery. But here's what really amazes me. Many of these routes remain the most efficient paths across their respective deserts. Modern GPS systems often suggest nearly identical routes to those chosen by desert travelers 3,000 years ago. Speaking of desert innovations, wait until you discover how these same cultures turned ordinary plants into natural aromatherapy sessions. Walking through a desert after rain, you'll notice something magical in the air. That sweet, earthy smell isn't just pleasant. It's actually natural aromatherapy at work. Desert plants are basically nature's incense factories. Take creosote bush, for instance. This scrubby little survivor releases a scent so distinctive that locals call it the smell of rain. When moisture hits its waxy leaves, it unleashes compounds that can literally calm your nervous system. Pretty neat, right? Then there's desert sage. While your kitchen variety is nice, desert sage packs 10 times the aromatic punch. Ancient peoples figured this out thousands of years ago, burning it during meditation ceremonies. The dry desert air concentrates these essential oils like a natural distillery. Here's what's fascinating. Desert plants don't waste energy on pretty flowers or lush leaves. Instead, they pour everything into creating powerful chemical compounds for survival. Those same compounds that repel insects and conserve water also happen to have incredible relaxing properties for humans. White sage, Palo Santo, desert lavender, they all evolved in harsh conditions, concentrating their essences into potent natural stress busters. The combination of low humidity and intense sun creates aromatic compounds you simply can't find anywhere else. But desert aromatics aren't just about individual plants. There's something even more remarkable happening when entire desert ecosystems work together. Desert lizards are basically the Einsteins of the reptile world, and their problem-solving skills would put most humans to shame. These scaly geniuses have figured out survival tricks that took us centuries to understand. Take the frilled lizard. When threatened, it doesn't just run away like a sensible creature would. Instead, it opens this massive umbrella-like collar around its neck, making itself look 3 times bigger. It's like carrying a portable costume party wherever you go. The predator sees this sudden transformation and thinks, "What the heck is that thing?" giving our lizard friend precious seconds to escape. But here's where it gets really clever. Desert geckos have learned to use their tails as emergency water storage. They fatten up those tails during good times, then literally live off the stored fat and water when food gets scarce. It's like having a built-in survival backpack that you can't lose. The patient hunting strategies are even more impressive. Some desert lizards will sit motionless for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They've mastered the art of energy conservation better than any meditation guru. These reptilian masterminds adapt their behavior based on temperature, season, and available resources. But their most fascinating trick involves something even more remarkable than problem solving. Desert weavers turn their looms into time machines, capturing entire landscapes in thread. These weren't just textiles. They were portable memories of home. Nomadic tribes faced a fascinating problem. How do you carry your homeland when you're constantly moving? Well, they figured out something brilliant. They wove it. Traditional desert tapestries contained everything. Mountain ranges became zigzag patterns. Oasis palms transformed into geometric trees. Even the color of morning sand found its way into the threads. Each piece told a story that could unfold anywhere. The Bedouins mastered this art form centuries ago. Their women would spend months creating a single tapestry, using wool from their own sheep and dyes from desert plants. But here's what makes it really special. They'd weave while traveling. The rhythm of camel steps actually helped keep their stitches even. These textiles served as maps too. Certain patterns indicated water sources. Others marked dangerous areas or safe camping spots. Clever, right? The weaving process itself became a form of meditation. Repetitive motions, steady breathing, hands working automatically while minds wandered. Desert weavers often said their best ideas came during the quiet hours at their looms. Each finished tapestry could literally wrap a family in the comfort of familiar landscapes, no matter how far they'd traveled from home. Speaking of desert comfort, ancient peoples discovered even more ingenious ways to create paradise in harsh lands. Desert gardens weren't just random patches of green in sandy wastelands. Ancient civilizations turned them into engineering masterpieces that worked with nature instead of fighting it. Take the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Though technically more Mesopotamian than pure desert, they showed how smart irrigation could create paradise in harsh conditions. But here's what most people don't know. Smaller desert communities perfected this art centuries earlier. Persian Qanat systems moved water underground for miles without losing a drop to evaporation. Clever, right? These tunnels connected mountain snowmelt to desert valleys, creating sustainable oases that lasted for generations. Some are still flowing today after 1,000 years. Then there's the genius of traditional Arabic courtyard gardens. 4 walls, a central fountain, and carefully chosen plants that actually cooled the air through transpiration. The layout wasn't just pretty. It was a natural air conditioning system that dropped temperatures by 15 degrees. Desert peoples knew which plants loved heat and which needed shade. They'd plant date palms first, then use their shadow to grow herbs and vegetables underneath. This layered approach maximized every precious drop of water. The most fascinating part? These gardens were designed for contemplation. Geometric patterns, trickling water sounds, and aromatic plants created spaces where the mind naturally slowed down. Speaking of slowing down, nothing captures desert rhythm quite like traditional music echoing through these ancient spaces. Desert percussion has been creating hypnotic rhythms for thousands of years, using materials the harsh landscape freely provides. Dried gourds become drums when stretched with animal hide. Hollow bones transform into flutes that whistle like wind through canyons. Even ordinary stones become instruments when struck together with perfect timing. The acoustics of desert spaces make every beat more powerful. Sound carries differently in dry air, cleaner, sharper, with less interference from moisture. Ancient drummers discovered this accidentally and built entire musical traditions around it. Nomadic tribes developed portable drum sets that could survive sandstorms and scorching heat. They carved instruments from ironwood that lasted generations. The repetitive beats helped travelers maintain steady walking pace during long journeys. Smart thinking, really. Desert drumming sessions often happened at night when temperatures dropped. Groups would gather around fires, creating rhythms that mimicked heartbeats or camel footsteps. The steady patterns naturally calmed minds and prepared bodies for deep sleep. Some desert cultures believed certain rhythms could summon rain or ward off dangerous animals. Whether that worked or not, the drumming definitely brought communities together. The meditative quality of repetitive beats helped people process the day's challenges and find inner peace. Traditional desert drums were tuned using heat from fires, creating sounds that perfectly match the landscape's natural frequency. Speaking of natural desert sounds, there's another cooling technique that's pure genius. Desert peoples figured out something that took modern engineers decades to understand. They created air conditioning without electricity, using nothing but physics, water, and clever design. The secret? Wind towers called badgirs in Persian architecture. These towering structures work like giant lungs for buildings. Cool air gets sucked down through the tower, while hot air escapes through vents. It's basically nature's HVAC system, and it can drop indoor temperatures by 20 degrees or more. But here's where it gets brilliant. They combine these towers with something called evapotranspiration. Fancy word, simple concept. Water evaporating cools the air around it. Desert architects placed shallow water channels and wet fabric at the base of wind towers. As air flowed over the water, it picked up moisture and dropped in temperature. The Persians went even further. They built underground chambers called yakchals that stayed cool year-round. These dome-shaped ice houses could store ice through scorching summers, using nothing but smart design and thick walls. Modern cities spend billions on cooling systems that guzzle electricity. Meanwhile, thousand-year-old desert buildings stay comfortable using wind and water. Makes you wonder who the real engineers are, right? Speaking of desert innovation, ancient peoples didn't just master cooling. They discovered treasures hidden in the earth that would make any jeweler jealous. Deep beneath the scorching desert surface, something magical happens when minerals meet extreme heat and pressure over millions of years. Desert jade isn't your typical green gemstone. It's tougher, more vibrant, and carries stories written in stone. Unlike the jade from lush mountain regions, desert jade forms under brutal conditions. The lack of water actually concentrates the minerals, creating stones so pure they practically glow. Ancient desert peoples knew this secret. They'd trek for days to specific locations where the earth revealed these green treasures after rare flash floods. Here's what blows my mind. Desert jade often contains tiny fossils of ancient sea creatures. Yup, what's now bone-dry wasteland was once underwater. These jade deposits literally hold ocean memories in their crystalline structure. Traditional healers believed desert jade possessed extra power because it survived such harsh conditions. Makes sense, right? If a stone can handle decades of blazing sun and freezing nights, it's probably pretty resilient. The color varies from pale mint to deep forest green, depending on the iron content in the surrounding rocks. Some pieces even show beautiful banding patterns where different mineral layers built up over centuries. Finding desert jade requires serious patience. You're basically treasure hunting in nature's most challenging classroom. But speaking of desert treasures, there's another kind of wisdom hiding in the heat. Desert cultures figured out something we modern folks completely forgot about. The siesta isn't laziness. It's genius survival strategy disguised as a nap. When the sun reaches its peak, around noon, temperatures can soar past 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Your body starts working overtime just to keep cool. But instead of fighting this natural rhythm, desert peoples embraced it. They'd retreat indoors, close their eyes, and let the hottest part of the day pass by in peaceful rest. The human body naturally dips in energy between 1 and 3 in the afternoon anyway. Ever notice how you get sleepy after lunch? That's not just the food talking. Your circadian rhythm is practically begging for a break. Spanish conquistadors learned this lesson the hard way in the New World deserts. They'd march through midday heat while indigenous peoples rested comfortably in shade. Guess who survived better? Here's what makes siesta culture brilliant. It's not just about avoiding heat. The afternoon rest actually resets your energy for evening activities when temperatures drop. Desert communities would come alive again around 4 or 5, working and socializing until well after sunset. Traditional siesta spots were carefully chosen too. Adobe houses with thick walls, courtyards with natural cross breezes, palm groves near oases. Speaking of those resourceful desert dwellers, they also mastered another cooling art form that didn't require any afternoon downtime. Desert basket weaving represents one of humanity's most elegant solutions to harsh living conditions. These aren't just containers. They're masterpieces of engineering disguised as art. The Pima people of Arizona created baskets so tightly woven they could hold water. Think about that for a moment. Plant fibers twisted into waterproof vessels without any modern sealants. The secret? They understood how desert materials behave when wet and dry. Well, here's something fascinating. Desert basket makers could identify over 50 different plant species just by touch. They knew exactly when each plant was ready for harvesting. Too early, and the fibers would be weak. Too late, and they'd crack. The patterns weren't random either. Each design told a story about the landscape around them. Zigzag lines represented lightning, bringing precious rain. Spirals mimicked the way sand swirls in desert winds. Diamond shapes? Those were mountain ranges on the horizon. But the real magic happened during the making process. Women would gather in circles, weaving while sharing stories and songs. The repetitive motion of their hands created a meditative rhythm that could last for hours. Some baskets took months to complete, with each maker adding her own subtle touches. The finished baskets could last for generations, holding everything from seeds to sacred items. Speaking of lasting treasures, ancient deserts have preserved something even more remarkable than baskets. Picture walking through what looks like a regular forest, except every single tree has turned to stone. That's exactly what you'll find in places like Arizona's petrified forest. where ancient trees became gorgeous rainbow-colored rocks over millions of years. The process started when massive forests got buried under layers of volcanic ash and sediment. No oxygen meant no decay. Instead, mineral-rich water slowly seeped through the buried logs, replacing the wood cells with quartz and other minerals bit by bit. Think of it like the world's slowest renovation project. What's mind-blowing is how perfectly preserved these stone trees are. You can still see bark patterns, tree rings, even tiny insect holes. Some logs are so detailed that experts can identify the exact species of tree from 200 million years ago. Talk about job security for ancient botanists. The colors are absolutely stunning too. Iron creates reds and oranges. Manganese produces purples and blues, while carbon makes deep blacks. It's like nature decided to paint with gemstones. Here's the really peaceful part. These fossil forests took between 10,000 and 1 million years to form. That kind of patience puts your daily worries into perspective, doesn't it? But while petrified wood required incredible patience to form, desert cultures discovered something that demanded even more precision and mathematical understanding. Desert cultures discovered something fascinating about mathematical patterns centuries before modern computers existed. They weren't just drawing pretty designs. They were encoding the universe's blueprint into their art and architecture. Take the traditional geometric patterns found in desert mosques and palaces, those intricate star and polygon designs. They're based on mathematical principles that would make your high school geometry teacher weep with joy. Desert artisans figured out how to create patterns that could theoretically extend infinitely without ever repeating exactly the same configuration. The coolest part? They did this with basic tools and sand. Ancient desert mathematicians noticed that certain ratios appeared everywhere in their harsh environment. The spiral growth of desert succulents followed the golden ratio. Sand dune formations created natural parabolic curves. Even the way desert settlements arranged themselves around water sources followed predictable geometric patterns. But here's what gets really wild. These mathematical insights weren't just academic exercises. Desert architects used sacred geometry to design buildings that naturally stayed cooler. The angles and proportions weren't random. They were calculated to maximize shade and airflow. Traditional desert carpet weavers embedded these same mathematical principles into their textiles. Each pattern told a story, while demonstrating complex geometric relationships. The repetitive process of creating these mathematical masterpieces became a form of moving meditation. However, the most remarkable mathematical phenomena in deserts aren't human-made at all. Desert peoples turned into master astronomers out of pure necessity. When your entire survival depends on knowing which direction leads to water and which leads to certain death, you get really good at reading the stars. The Bedouins could navigate hundreds of miles across seemingly identical sand dunes using nothing but celestial markers. Pretty impressive for folks without GPS, right? They developed intricate mental maps connecting star positions to ground landmarks. A particular constellation rising over a specific sand ridge meant water lay 3 days' walk to the northeast. The brightness of certain stars indicated weather changes coming from distant regions. These weren't just casual observations either. This knowledge took generations to perfect and was passed down like precious family heirlooms. The really clever part? They created portable astronomical instruments from materials found right in the desert. Polished metal discs served as star mirrors. Carefully arranged stones became calculation devices. Even camel bones were carved into precise measuring tools for tracking celestial movements. Their timing had to be flawless. Navigate by the wrong star cluster, and your entire caravan could wander into the emptiness forever. But get it right, and you'd arrive at hidden oases exactly when promised. This nightly ritual of star watching became deeply meditative, a quiet communion with the cosmos that brought both practical wisdom and profound peace. But desert astronomy required more than just looking up and hoping for the best. Deep beneath the scorching desert surface lies something remarkable: clay. Not just any clay, though. These are healing clays that have been concentrated and refined by thousands of years of intense heat and mineral-rich groundwater. Desert peoples discovered these therapeutic treasures long before modern spas existed. They noticed how certain clay deposits could soothe skin conditions, reduce inflammation, and even help with digestive issues. Smart, right? The magic happens because desert clays absorb minerals differently than regular clay. When underground water, carrying dissolved salts and trace elements, moves through these deposits, it creates incredibly concentrated healing compounds. Some desert clays contain up to 50 different beneficial minerals. Ancient healers developed elaborate preparation rituals. They'd gather clay at specific times, often during the cooler morning hours. Then came the careful mixing process, adding just enough pure spring water to create the perfect consistency. Too much water diluted the healing properties. Too little made application impossible. Different colored clays offered different benefits. Red clays, rich in iron oxide, were used for circulation problems. White clays, high in kaolin, worked wonders for sensitive skin. Green clays packed with minerals helped detoxify. The application process became almost ceremonial. Patients would lie still while the clay slowly dried, pulling impurities from their skin. But these ancient healing sites held even greater treasures than medicinal clay. Deep in the Sahara, there's a monastery where monks have preserved manuscripts for over 12 centuries. The dry desert air acts like nature's own vacuum seal, protecting ancient texts that would have crumbled to dust anywhere else on Earth. But here's what blows my mind. These aren't just religious documents. We're talking about mathematical treatises, medical journals, poetry collections, and even cookbooks from civilizations that vanished long ago. The desert became humanity's ultimate filing cabinet. The Atacama Desert in Chile houses libraries that make Alexandria look like a neighborhood bookshop. Spanish conquistadors hid entire collections in underground chambers, thinking they'd return in a few years. 500 years later, those books are still perfectly readable. Then there's the fascinating case of Timbuktu's hidden libraries. When raiders threatened the city, scholars didn't flee with gold or jewels. They grabbed books. Families buried precious manuscripts in the sand, creating time capsules of human knowledge. Makes you wonder what your priorities would be, right? Desert monasteries became centers of learning precisely because nothing ever rotted away. Monks could build collections that lasted generations. The silence helped too. Perfect conditions for deep study and contemplation. These desert scholars understood something profound about preservation and patience. Speaking of patience, wait until you hear how ancient desert peoples used the landscape itself as their compass. Desert peoples figured out something most of us never think about. Energy flows through landscapes just like water through riverbeds. and they mastered reading these invisible currents. Take the ancient Pueblo builders in the American Southwest. They didn't just plop their homes anywhere. They studied wind patterns for months before placing a single stone. Makes sense, right? A house positioned wrong could turn into a furnace or get sandblasted daily. But here's what's fascinating. They believed certain spots in the desert held concentrated life force. Not mystical mumbo-jumbo, but practical wisdom about microclimates and natural protection. These builders would test locations by spending nights in different areas. Where did they sleep best? Where did morning dew collect? Which spots stayed coolest during blazing afternoons? The results were incredible. Their structures stayed naturally comfortable, while European colonists were building death traps that cooked people alive. Ancient desert architects also understood something called dragon lines, natural pathways where wind and water moved most efficiently. They'd align their buildings with these flows instead of fighting them. Even their doorways had purpose beyond keeping sand out. Eastern entrances caught gentle morning light. Western walls stayed thick and windowless to block punishing afternoon heat. But the real genius shows in how they shape the energy around their healing spaces. Desert cacti have been nature's pharmacists for thousands of years. These spiny giants store more than just water in their thick flesh. They're packed with compounds that can heal everything, from wounds to digestive issues. The prickly pear cactus produces a gel that works better than many modern burn treatments. Ancient desert dwellers would slice open the pads and apply the cooling gel directly to cuts and burns. The stuff works so well that hospitals in Mexico still use it today. Talk about staying power. But here's where things get really interesting. The barrel cactus contains natural electrolytes that desert travelers used as a sports drink centuries before Gatorade existed. One barrel cactus can provide enough liquid and minerals to keep someone alive for days. The Seri people of Sonora would carefully extract this life-saving fluid using hollowed-out sticks. Then there's the San Pedro cactus, which produces compounds that help with inflammation and pain relief. Desert healers would prepare special teas from small sections of the plant, creating powerful natural painkillers that rival modern medications. What makes cactus medicine so potent? The harsh desert environment forces these plants to concentrate their healing compounds. It's like nature's pressure cooker. The tougher the conditions, the stronger the medicine. Speaking of desert treasures, wait until you discover what forms in those rare freshwater springs hidden throughout the harshest landscapes. Most people think pearls only come from oysters in the ocean. Well, that's about as wrong as wearing a tuxedo to a camel race. Desert oases hide some of the rarest pearls on Earth. These tiny freshwater springs, scattered across the world's driest places, sometimes contain freshwater mussels that have been quietly making pearls for centuries. The crazy part? Nobody bothers looking for them because, it's a desert. In the Sahara, ancient Tuareg traders occasionally stumbled upon these hidden gems while digging wells. They called them tears of the earth, which honestly sounds way cooler than freshwater pearls. The desert conditions actually help preserve these delicate shells perfectly. No humidity to rot them, no storms to crush them. But here's what blows my mind. These desert pearls develop differently than their ocean cousins. The mineral-rich water, filtered through miles of rock and sand, creates pearls with unique colors. Some have golden hues from iron deposits. Others shimmer with pink from trace minerals. The patience required to harvest these treasures matches the desert itself. Traditional pearl divers would visit the same oases year after year, checking if the mussels were ready. Sometimes they'd wait decades for a single perfect pearl. Speaking of waiting decades, the wind has been just as patient, sculpting some truly incredible masterpieces in stone. Wind doesn't just blow sand around randomly in the desert. It's actually one of nature's most patient artists, spending thousands of years carefully carving rock into shapes that would make any sculptor jealous. Take the famous Delicate Arch in Utah's desert regions. Wind worked on that sandstone for over 100,000 years, grain by grain, creating what looks like a massive stone rainbow frozen in time. The process is so gentle that you could watch for your entire lifetime and never see a visible change. But here's what's fascinating about wind erosion. It doesn't work alone. The wind picks up tiny particles of sand and uses them like the world's slowest sandblaster. Each grain acts like a microscopic chisel, wearing away at the rock face one tiny scratch at a time. It's meditation in geological form. The most amazing part? Wind always finds the soft spots first. It follows the natural weaknesses in the rock, creating holes that gradually expand into windows, then arches, then eventually collapse into new formations. The whole cycle can take millions of years. These natural sculptures have something store-bought art never will. They're constantly changing. Every windstorm adds another microscopic touch to the masterpiece. Speaking of desert artistry, wait until you discover how desert bees create liquid gold in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Desert bees are basically the superheroes of the insect world. While regular bees complain about a little rain, these tough little workers thrive in places where most creatures would literally shrivel up and die. But here's what blows my mind. Desert bees don't just survive the heat. They've completely redesigned their entire lifestyle around it. They wake up before dawn, work like crazy during the cool morning hours, then take the world's most sensible lunch break when temperatures hit triple digits. Smart, right? The honey they produce? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Desert wildflowers might only bloom for a few weeks after rare rainfalls, but when they do, they're absolutely loaded with concentrated nectar. It's like nature's energy drink, packed into tiny, colorful explosions across the landscape. Traditional desert beekeepers learned to work with this rhythm centuries ago. They'd move their hives to follow blooming patterns, creating a nomadic lifestyle that matched the bees' natural instincts. The resulting honey often tastes like nothing you've ever experienced. Hints of sage, mesquite, and desert wildflowers all mixed together. Then there's the whole underground aspect of desert water sources that makes this possible in the first place. Deep beneath the Sahara Desert lies something incredible. An underground river system so massive it could cover all of Germany with water 3 feet deep. These hidden highways flow silently through rock and sand, connecting regions thousands of miles apart. The Nubian sandstone aquifer stretches under 4 countries. Libya, Egypt, Chad, and Sudan all share this buried treasure. Water that fell as rain 25,000 years ago still flows down there today. Makes you wonder what else is hiding under our feet, right? Ancient peoples knew these secrets. They dug wells in seemingly impossible places, finding water where others saw only endless sand. Traditional dowsers could sense underground streams using nothing but wooden sticks and generations of inherited knowledge. Their accuracy was remarkable. But here's what's really wild. Some of these underground rivers are bigger than the ones we see above ground. The Great Artesian Basin in Australia spans over 500,000 square miles underground. That's like having the Amazon River flowing invisibly beneath your feet. Desert nomads called these aquifers the rivers of the jinn. They believed spirits guided the water through secret passages. Well, they weren't wrong about the secret passages part. The most amazing thing? These underground systems connect oases that seem completely isolated. Water that starts in one desert can emerge hundreds of miles away, creating life in the most unexpected places. And speaking of unexpected places where life appears, when you think luxury textiles, deserts probably aren't the first place that comes to mind. Well, prepare to have your assumptions shattered. Deep in the Sahara, certain spider species produce silk that rivals the finest materials money can buy. The golden orb weaver creates strands stronger than steel cable, with a shimmering quality that ancient traders prized above gold. But here's what blows my mind. Harvesting this silk requires the patience of a monk. Traditional silk gatherers would spend entire seasons tracking these spiders across dunes. They'd collect tiny amounts each day, never taking enough to harm the creatures. One robe required silk from over 3,000 spiders. Talk about dedication. Then there's the desert moth caterpillars. These little guys spin cocoons using fibers that naturally repel heat and moisture. Desert peoples discovered that clothing made from these cocoons kept them cool during scorching days and warm during frigid nights. The ultimate climate control system, courtesy of nature. The craziest part? The silk changes color based on temperature. Imagine wearing a shirt that shifts from cream to deep amber as the desert heats up. Ancient royalty paid fortunes for garments that literally transformed with the weather. Processing this silk became a meditative art form. Families would gather at dawn, working slowly and methodically while the desert awakened around them. But wait until you hear about the stone circles scattered across these same deserts. Scattered across deserts worldwide, mysterious stone circles have puzzled visitors for thousands of years. These aren't random rock piles left by ancient tourists. They're sophisticated astronomical computers built by desert peoples who understood the sky better than most modern astronomers. The Nabta, Playa Stone Circle in Egypt's Nubian desert is older than Stonehenge by over 1,000 years. Well, the desert dwellers who built it weren't showing off. They needed to track seasons for survival. When you live where rain falls maybe once a decade, knowing exactly when water might arrive becomes literally life or death. Here's what makes desert stone circles so clever. The builders used the desert's crystal clear air to their advantage. Without humidity or pollution, they could spot stars we can barely see today. They'd arrange stones to frame specific constellations, creating permanent calendars that lasted millennia. But the construction process? That was meditation in motion. Moving massive stones across desert terrain required incredible patience and teamwork. Each placement was deliberate, tested over months of observation. The circles became gathering places where knowledge passed between generations through quiet nighttime lessons. These ancient timekeepers still work perfectly today. The stones continue their eternal dance with celestial bodies, marking solstices and equinoxes with mathematical precision. Speaking of desert mathematics, these same cultures discovered something equally fascinating about extracting nature's most precious essences from harsh desert plants. desert peoples figured out something that took modern perfume companies centuries to discover. When you extract oils from plants growing in harsh, dry conditions, you get incredibly concentrated essences that would make any fancy department store jealous. The process starts with timing. Desert plants don't waste energy on weak scents. They produce their most potent oils right before dawn, when the air is cool and still. Smart desert dwellers learn to harvest aromatic plants like desert sage, creosote bush, and various flowering cacti during these precious morning hours. But here's where desert perfume making gets really clever. Instead of using alcohol like modern perfumers, traditional desert communities used animal fats or plant-based oils as their base. These carriers actually preserve the scents longer in dry climates. Makes sense, right? Why use something that evaporates quickly when you live where water disappears fast? The extraction methods were surprisingly sophisticated. Some groups buried clay pots filled with fresh desert flowers and oil, letting the earth's steady temperature slowly draw out the essences over weeks. Others used steam distillation with precious water, capturing every drop of both the aromatic oils and the water for reuse. Well, the most amazing part wasn't just the perfumes themselves, but the rituals surrounding their creation. These weren't just beauty products, but sacred preparations. Speaking of sacred traditions, desert shade creation involved its own ancient wisdom that kept entire communities cool. Desert people figured out something we're just rediscovering today. They became absolute masters at creating shade, turning scorching landscapes into comfortable living spaces without any electricity or fancy cooling systems. Take traditional Middle Eastern courtyards. These weren't random designs. They were brilliant heat management systems. The tall walls created deep shadows that moved predictably throughout the day. Smart builders positioned doorways and windows to catch these moving shade pockets. Residents literally followed the shade around their homes like a slow, cooling dance. But here's where desert architects got really clever. They used something called thermal mass. Those thick adobe walls, they absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night, creating natural temperature regulation. It's like having a giant, patient battery that stores coolness. The Berbers of North Africa took shade science even further. They developed intricate tent designs with multiple layers that created air gaps. These gaps acted like natural insulation, keeping the interior surprisingly comfortable even when outside temperatures hit 120 degrees. Desert dwellers also mastered the psychology of shade. They knew that even a few degrees of cooling could make people feel dramatically more comfortable. The simple act of stepping into well-designed shade triggered an immediate sense of relief and safety. Speaking of desert innovations, wait until you discover how these same people became invisible masters of their environment. Desert animals are basically magicians when it comes to disappearing. Take the fennec fox. Those oversized ears aren't just for show. When danger approaches, they flatten against rocks and become completely invisible. Their sandy fur matches the desert floor so perfectly that you could step right over one without knowing. But here's what's really wild about desert camouflage. It's not just about color matching. Desert creatures master the art of staying absolutely still. A horned lizard can freeze for hours, becoming part of the landscape. Their patience puts meditation masters to shame. The sidewinder rattlesnake takes hiding to another level entirely. It buries itself in sand with just its eyes peeking out, looking like two tiny pebbles. Meanwhile, Desert spiders create trapdoors from sand and silk, waiting motionless for unsuspecting prey to wander by. Ancient desert hunters learned these techniques by watching animals for generations. They developed clothing that mimicked animal patterns and learned the value of perfect stillness. Some tribes could hide in plain sight by simply not moving for extended periods. The ghost crab might win the invisibility contest, though. Its shell changes color to match whatever surface it's on, and it moves so smoothly across sand that it barely leaves tracks. Speaking of desert heat, there's something equally fascinating about how these same creatures use temperature itself as medicine. Getting buried in heated sand might sound like torture, but ancient desert cultures turned this into one of the most relaxing healing treatments ever discovered. Desert communities, from Egypt to Morocco, have been using sand therapy for thousands of years, and honestly, they were onto something incredible. The process is surprisingly simple. During peak desert heat, therapeutic sand reaches temperatures between 90 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Healers would bury patients up to their necks, leaving just the head exposed under shade. Sounds crazy? Well, the results speak for themselves. Hot sand creates deep, penetrating heat that relaxes muscles better than most modern treatments. The weight provides gentle compression therapy, while the minerals in desert sand get absorbed through the skin. Ancient practitioners noticed that people emerge from sand baths feeling completely renewed, with joint pain mysteriously vanished. But here's what makes it truly meditative. Lying motionless in warm sand forces your body into complete stillness. Your breathing naturally slows down. The gentle pressure feels like the world's most comfortable weighted blanket. Many patients would drift into the deepest sleep of their lives. Modern spas have tried to recreate this experience, but nothing matches authentic desert sand heated by natural sunlight. The minerals vary by location, creating unique therapeutic properties. Speaking of desert nights, those same clear skies that heat the sand during the day reveal something equally magical after dark. Ancient desert peoples looked up at the same stars we see tonight, but they saw entire libraries written across the sky. Makes sense when you think about it. No city lights, no pollution, just crystal clear darkness punctured by brilliant starlight. The Bedouins called the constellation we know as the Big Dipper the funeral bier, telling stories of how it carried souls across the heavens. But here's what's fascinating. They didn't just tell stories for entertainment. These constellation tales were actually sophisticated navigation systems disguised as bedtime stories. Desert navigators memorized hundreds of star stories because each tale contained precise directional information. The Tuareg people of the Sahara had a constellation they called the ostrich drinking water, which appeared at exactly the right time to guide caravans to seasonal water sources. Brilliant, right? Then there's the Aboriginal Australians, who created song stories linking star patterns to underground water locations. They'd literally sing their way across thousands of miles of desert, using constellation stories as GPS coordinates. These weren't random myths. They were compressed survival manuals passed down through generations. Each story contained layers of information about timing, direction, weather patterns, and resource locations. But the most relaxing part, every night, these ancient stargazers knew exactly where they were in both space and time, simply by looking up at their celestial storytellers. Speaking of ancient navigation wisdom, desert peoples also created some ingenious earthbound highway systems. Ancient desert peoples were basically the world's first highway engineers, but instead of asphalt and concrete, they used something much smarter: pure observation and patience. These weren't random paths carved by wandering nomads. These were carefully planned, precisely maintained transportation networks that lasted thousands of years. The Romans get all the credit for road building, but desert cultures were doing it centuries earlier with zero environmental damage. Take the frankincense route through Arabia. 6,000 miles of perfectly planned pathways connecting Yemen to Syria. Every 20 miles, a rest station with water, food, and shelter. The engineering was so good that merchants could predict their arrival times within hours. But here's what blows my mind. They built these routes to work with the desert, not against it. No cutting through mountains or draining wetlands. They followed natural contours, used existing rock formations as landmarks, and positioned rest stops at natural water sources. The maintenance system was genius too. Local tribes took responsibility for different sections, not because some king forced them, but because it made economic sense. Healthy trade routes meant prosperity for everyone along the path. They even developed a sophisticated signaling system using smoke during the day and fires at night. Basically, ancient GPS, but powered by cooperation instead of satellites. Speaking of cooperation, wait until you hear how desert peoples turned colored stones into actual mood detectors. Desert stones that change colors like mood rings might sound like something from a fairy tale, but these geological chameleons exist throughout the world's most arid regions. Temperature-sensitive minerals respond to the desert's dramatic daily swings between scorching days and surprisingly chilly nights. Take thermochromic minerals like certain types of fluorite or alexandrite. During blazing afternoon heat, they display deep purples and rich reds. But wait until the desert cools after sunset. Those same stones gradually shift to soft blues and gentle greens, creating a natural light show that happens without any human intervention. The process works through crystal structure changes. Heat makes atoms vibrate differently, altering how light bounces around inside the stone. It's like having a geological thermometer that shows temperature through beautiful color displays instead of boring numbers. Ancient desert peoples noticed these phenomena long before modern geology explained the mechanics. They believed color-changing stones held special powers, often incorporating them into healing ceremonies and meditation practices. Some cultures thought the stones captured the desert spirit, changing moods with the land itself. Finding these treasures requires patience and a keen eye. The best specimens often hide in rocky outcrops, where temperature variations are most extreme. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. Some desert locations create their own unique microclimates that produce entirely different effects. Desert peoples weren't just building with rocks and mud. They were literally growing their homes. Cacti became living walls, breathing architecture that stayed cool in summer heat and provided protection from harsh winds. The saguaro cactus made perfect corner posts. These giants could live 200 years, meaning your great-great-grandchildren would inherit the same structural support you planted. Talk about sustainable construction. The thick flesh stored water during dry spells, creating natural air conditioning as moisture slowly evaporated through the skin. But here's where it gets clever. Desert builders would weave smaller barrel cacti into fence systems. The spines kept out unwanted visitors better than any security system. Plus, these living fences actually grew stronger over time, unlike wooden posts that rotted away. Prickly pear cacti served as natural insulation between wall layers. Their flat pads could be harvested for food without killing the plant, so your house literally fed your family. The mucilage inside acted like natural glue, binding adobe bricks together while providing flexibility during temperature swings. Some communities created entire neighborhoods using interconnected cactus gardens. Pathways wound between towering columns of living green, creating shaded corridors that stayed cool even at midday. These weren't just homes. They were ecosystems that took care of their inhabitants for generations. Speaking of natural timekeeping, desert peoples had another brilliant invention. The ancient art of desert timekeeping reaches its peak with traditional sundials. These weren't your ordinary garden variety shadow clocks. Desert sundials had to be engineering marvels. Why? Well, desert latitudes create tricky shadow angles that would make regular sundials about as useful as a chocolate teapot. The makers compensated by tilting their gnomons at precisely calculated angles, accounting for seasonal sun paths that dance across the sky like cosmic ballet dancers. Then there's the clarity factor. Desert air acts like nature's magnifying glass, making shadows razor sharp. No fuzzy edges here. Ancient timekeepers could read time down to minutes, not just hours. They carved intricate hour lines that accounted for everything from summer solstices to winter minimums. But here's what gets really interesting. These sundials became meditation tools. Watching shadows creep across stone markers created a hypnotic rhythm that naturally slowed human perception. Desert peoples discovered that shadow watching induced the same calm state as deep breathing exercises. The most sophisticated desert sundials included correction tables carved right into the stone. These compensated for the equation of time. Basically, how real sun time differs from clock time throughout the year. Pretty clever for folks without calculators, right? Speaking of desert innovations, wait until you discover how these same cultures created healing destinations that drew pilgrims from thousands of miles away. Ancient desert healing sites weren't just random spots where people hoped to feel better. These places were carefully chosen based on specific combinations of mineral-rich water, therapeutic climate, and unique geological features that actually worked. Take the legendary healing springs of the Sahara. Berber tribes knew exactly which underground springs contained the right minerals for different ailments. Some springs had high sulfur content for joint pain. Others were rich in lithium for calming the mind. They mapped these locations across thousands of miles of desert. The Dead Sea region became famous for good reason. That incredibly salty water, combined with the desert's low humidity and intense mineral atmosphere, created perfect conditions for treating skin conditions. Ancient Romans traveled hundreds of miles just to soak in these therapeutic waters. But here's what's really fascinating. These desert healing centers operated on appointment systems that would make modern spas jealous. Desert nomads would plan their routes around seasonal visits to specific healing locations. They knew exactly when certain springs reached optimal temperatures. The healing wasn't just about the water either. Desert air itself was medicine. The extremely dry conditions helped people with respiratory problems breathe easier. The silence reduced stress. The steady heat relaxed muscles naturally. However, the most magical healing element wasn't the minerals or climate at all. Desert landscapes don't just inspire the eye. They create entire musical traditions that have shaped cultures for thousands of years. The vast emptiness acts like nature's recording studio, where every sound carries weight and meaning. Traditional desert instruments were born from necessity and environment. Nomadic peoples crafted flutes from dried cactus stems, creating haunting melodies that mimic wind patterns across dunes. These weren't just instruments. They were survival tools that helped travelers communicate across vast distances. The berimbau, that distinctive bow-shaped instrument from desert regions, uses a dried gourd as a resonator. Its metallic twang perfectly captures the shimmering heat waves rising from sun-baked earth. Desert drums were made from stretched animal hides over clay pots, producing deep, meditative rhythms that match the slow pulse of desert life. But here's what's fascinating. Desert music traditionally avoided complex harmonies. Instead, it focused on single melodic lines that could travel far without interference. Smart, right? Desert spiritual practices used music as a pathway to meditation. The repetitive nature of traditional desert chants mirrors the hypnotic patterns found in shifting sand and endless horizons. These weren't performances. They were tools for achieving inner stillness. Many desert cultures believed certain musical scales could literally change the weather or heal illness. While that might sound far-fetched, the therapeutic effects of these ancient musical traditions continue to influence modern meditation practices. Speaking of ancient traditions, desert artists discovered something remarkable about creating temporary masterpieces. Desert cultures across the world developed something magical: sand painting. These weren't your typical art projects that lasted forever on museum walls. These were temporary masterpieces designed to disappear. Tibetan monks spend weeks creating intricate mandalas from colored sand, only to sweep them away when complete. But desert peoples had been doing this centuries before Buddhism made it famous. Native American tribes in the Southwest used different colored sands from various desert locations to create healing ceremonies. Red sand from iron-rich areas, white from gypsum deposits, yellow from sandstone formations. The process itself becomes deeply meditative, each grain placed with intention. No rushing, no shortcuts. Your breathing naturally slows as you focus on tiny details that most people will never notice. Here's what's fascinating. The colors come entirely from natural desert minerals. Iron creates reds and oranges. Copper produces blues and greens. Manganese makes purple and black. Desert peoples became master chemists, knowing exactly where to find each shade. The temporary nature teaches something profound about letting go. You create beauty, knowing it won't last. Wind will scatter it. Footsteps will disturb it. Rain will wash it away. That's the point. But even as these sand paintings fade, desert elders continue passing down ancient knowledge through generations. Deep in the heart of desert communities, the most valuable people weren't warriors or traders. They were the quiet ones who remembered everything. Desert elders carried libraries in their minds. No books, no computers, just decades of watching, learning, and surviving. They knew which stars meant rain was coming 3 months away, which plants bloomed only after specific wind patterns, how to read animal behavior like a weather forecast. But here's what made them truly special. They knew teaching was an art form. These wisdom keepers never dumped information on anyone. Instead, they told stories that stuck. A tale about a foolish traveler who ignored the morning dew might actually be a lesson about finding water. a funny story about a stubborn camel could teach patience and persistence. The apprenticeship system was brilliant in its simplicity. Young people didn't sit in classrooms. They shadowed elders for years, absorbing knowledge through daily life, making mistakes, asking questions, slowly earning the right to more dangerous knowledge. What's fascinating is how they encoded survival information into songs, proverbs, even jokes. Memory techniques disguised as entertainment. A silly rhyme about desert mice might actually contain the secret to finding underground water sources. These human libraries preserved knowledge that kept entire communities alive for thousands of years. Speaking of preservation, deserts themselves follow ancient rhythms that teach profound lessons about life's natural cycles. Desert environments operate on a completely different timeline than our rushed modern world. Where we measure success in quarters and deadlines, deserts think in centuries and millennia. The ancient saguaro cactus doesn't panic about growth. It simply adds one arm every 75 to 100 years. Talk about taking your time. This patient rhythm becomes medicine for our anxious minds. Desert dwellers throughout history understood something we're just rediscovering. True peace comes from syncing with natural cycles rather than fighting them. The Tohono O'odham people measured seasons not by calendar dates, but by when certain cacti bloomed or when specific birds returned. But here's what's fascinating. This slow desert time actually rewires our brains. Studies show that spending time in desert environments naturally lowers cortisol levels and slows our internal clocks. Your breathing deepens. Your shoulders relax. Even your heart rate matches the unhurried desert pulse. The cycles never truly end either. Rain comes eventually. Seeds that waited decades finally sprout. Animals emerge from summer hiding spots when temperatures drop. Every ending becomes a beginning in disguise. Desert peoples developed entire philosophies around this eternal rhythm. They learned that fighting natural cycles creates suffering, while flowing with them brings wisdom. And speaking of desert wisdom, wait until you discover how these timeless landscapes can actually transform the way you sleep and dream. Close your eyes and let the desert carry you into the deepest sleep you've ever known. The silence here isn't just quiet, it's the complete absence of everything that keeps your mind racing at 3 in the morning. No traffic humming in the distance, no neighbors arguing through thin walls, just pure, therapeutic nothingness that wraps around your thoughts like warm sand. Desert peoples have known this secret for thousands of years. They'd travel for days just to reach these sacred sleeping grounds where the earth itself seems designed for rest. The sand holds the day's warmth just long enough to cradle your body, then releases it slowly as the stars take over. Your breathing naturally slows to match the desert's rhythm. Inhale the clean, dry air. Exhale everything that's been weighing you down. The vastness above makes your worries feel incredibly small, doesn't it? Ancient nomads believed desert dreams were messages from the earth itself. Maybe they were onto something. When you sleep, surrounded by such timeless peace, your mind finally stops trying to solve tomorrow's problems. The desert has been here for millions of years before you arrived. It'll be here long after you wake up. Right now, though, it's holding space just for you. Sweet desert dreams await.